there we go. Wonderful. All right. It's 1:02 p.m., February 25th. We're going to begin the afternoon work session, Lake County Board of County Commissioners. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming on in. On our agenda this afternoon, we have presentation from community partners led by Laurie Simonson. Hello, Laurie.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me join you all. I do not have a presentation. I let everyone know that I'm gonna rely on my bad puns and dad jokes. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to the county for including the city in this orientation. So thank you for inviting me to your home. And you know, I thought a lot about this presentation and what it should include. And what I realized is you should never show up at someone's house empty-handed. So I got a little something for everybody.
Oh.
And I hope.
I got.
Wow, thank you
There
very
you
much.
go. Get this.
Thank you.
So if you're familiar with this book, I'm gonna give a shout out to Two Dog Market. Because I got this idea, because I am rereading this book, and I just think it's a fascinating history, and it's out of print. So Two Dog Market was able to get me 3 copies of this book. But I think what's interesting about this book is it's just a fascinating history of how not to get things done in our community. If you remember, this book is about the EPA's efforts at cleaning up mining waste in our community. And, you know, you can look at the length of the book, it spans, 10 and 20 years. That the EPA came in and they had efforts to clean up mining waste. And I think the lesson I've taken away from it is the EPA came in and said, we know better. We know better, and we're gonna come in and we're gonna tell you what you need to do. And I think it took a long time for them to realize that that really didn't go over very well in our community. I think the issue is that actually it's on page 143, I had to look it up. The EPA administrator, the head Region 8 person who was in charge of the project, basically at the end of that chapter says, I wasn't here to make friends. And I think that's kind of the takeaway of the book, is you look at page 143, it's halfway through the book. And essentially they have made no progress as of that point as far as EPA efforts to clean up our community, and had met complete public resistance. And so if you don't know, the second half of the book talks about the success. What did the EPA do that worked? And I think one of the things is they sat down and they started to listen. They started to listen to the community, more so than they had before, more so than just a public meeting where people could come, because people had tired of the public meetings. And there's another quote in there by a woman who basically said, after 10 years of going to public meetings, you just kind of wear out. And so if you don't know, Rebecca Thomas is one of the people who's in that book, and she's on our city council now. And so I asked her, I said, what happened? She said, we just started having beers with people. We just started to meet with people. And I thought about that, and I thought, that's an interesting turnaround, because that's 10, 15 years of entrenched public opposition to an idea. And so the relationships do matter. And so that's what I wanted to start with, is relationships do matter. And I think our community looks to local government to work effectively together. So we all succeed together. And I think that's the main reason I'm really glad you invited me here. I don't have a presentation, in part because I know that I'm right after lunch. And I thought if I had a bunch of slides, it would be like, those dolls you had when you were a kid, you laid the head back and the eyes would just close. So you are gonna get some data about the city, but I think that will come. I remember when I was hired, I sat down with folks and I would get fire hosed with information, and I would tell people, I'm only gonna retain about 1/3 of that, because it's so much right now. And so we respect that it is so much right now, and you're on that learning curve. And we're grateful that we could be a part of that learning curve. So I do, like what I would say is, the point of the book is, I think it's a fascinating history. It's a gift from me to you. It's not necessarily from the city, it's from me. But I think that the other takeaway is, and the mayor will laugh that I'm gonna quote Ted Lasso, but it is be curious, not judgmental. And that's one of the things I think we've been trying to do at the city, is to try and figure out, why did we do something that way? Is it the best way to do it? And I think us working with you as partners in the county is a huge part of that. And so it's not lost on me that we just passed our strategic plan that is 2025 through 2027. Big effort that Mayor spearheaded. We've been doing the process for about, not quite a year. But the city council just approved our strategic plan, and one of the main imperatives is better collaboration with the county. And I think that that's huge. So it's a testament that that's what we heard from the community, and that that's what the city council has made a priority. And so I'd like to just highlight a few things that we're off on a great start. I think a fantastic start. The first being the comprehensive plan. And I had a little bit of background. I was a planning commissioner back in the day, and what I realized is the comprehensive plan is probably one of the most important documents that you will have for land use planning for the next 10 years. It's a huge undertaking. So I think it's fantastic that our planning departments are working hand in hand. Our planning directors are working hand in hand to make sure that that document is something that reflects our community and that we are collaborating. So when the public says we want the city and the county to collaborate more, this is a huge project, a very important deal. It's how we're gonna look in the next 10 years. And so I wanted to highlight that. The other one is, and I wanted to shout out to Lauren Schneider about this, is the lifetime permits, right? So this is the time of year when we're considering those. There's a lot of consternation about it in our community. Some, absolutely, it's fantastic, everything is great, we want the race to continue, it brings us economic benefit, but that's maybe the tourism aspect of it. The other aspect is there's tension and there's friction. And so collaborating to do two very important things. One, reduce the friction that the event creates on our community while uplifting our businesses that do need that for economic development. So those two buckets and the collaboration between the city and the county being on the same page, I credit Lauren for starting that conversation and getting that going. So you've got two big ticket items. Those are big things. And then I just think the other smaller things that don't go unnoticed, you think of relationships, the city-county work sessions, that we're committing to do those quarterly, that we had the city-county meet and greet. Right, so that's the lesson from the EPA book about creating those relationships so that we're not always gonna agree, but we can agree to disagree respectfully, we can agree to disagree on policy, and we can debate it, but at the end of the day, the community expects us to get the work done. They don't care. Half the people I know don't know if they live in the city or the county. When someone says to me, oh my gosh, it's great that the city passed an OHV ordinance last night, I said, no, that's the county. We get confused with each other all the time, so our best interest is you succeed, we succeed, the community succeeds. So I think that's, sort of the preface to all of this is that I think I appreciate you including the city because our partnership is extremely important for us to succeed. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some mundane things. I think a little bit of the history, because I think you've gotten some of the history of the development of the county as a local government. And I think the trajectory for the city has been much the same. So the city did not have, it was the same form of government that the county had, which is elected to manage the day-to-day operations. So in our world, it was the mayor, right? And I credit Mayor Laurie for being so shadowing to know that that model just doesn't work for us anymore. We have too many pressures, it's too much. And having that institutional knowledge of a stable, municipal civil service is important from election to election. And so we, at the same time as the county did, you created a county manager position, the city created a city administrator position. I like to say I'm the first city administrator, female city administrator city's ever had, but I'm the first one, so I get to be the first of everything. So you get to create what it looks like. And so I got here And I came to Leadville because I love Leadville and because I care and because I wanna make things better. And I walked in the door and we had in City Hall, the mayor, one admin and a finance director. And I was like, okay, all right, sounds great. Completely not what you need to build a municipal government. There was no planning department. There was no trained planning official. There was no HR department. So what has happened over the 3 years is much the same as the county is building a local government, building a true municipal government where services are more effective, record keeping is more effective. And so I know Ms. Schneider in the planning department is eternally grateful. The first position I created was a planning department. Hired Chapin LaChance, and in part because if we do not plan how we're going to grow now, in 10 years we're done, right? In 10 years the permits have been pulled, the projects have been approved, and you look how you look. So other communities, I came from another resort community, I came from Moab, the genie's out of the bottle, and they are having the hardest time in the world stuffing that genie back in. Lots of tourists, lots of hotel builds, lots of short-term rentals.
Do you know Evan Clapper?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's county commissioner.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the issue is that they promoted tourism and promoted it, so some of the issues and the friction, so much harder to get under control because the hotels, tons of them, lots of them. So when people come to Moab, a lot of times now they'll say, it's not the same, it's ruined, it's not the same community it was. The beauty of it is, if you look at our community, Governor Polis posted on Facebook, I don't know, months ago, look at Leadville, highest incorporated city in the US, blah, blah, blah. Read the comments. You read the comments. I love Leadville. I grew up there. It's great. It's wonderful. Oh my gosh, is that church still there? The saloon, oh my God. Not hate. It's changed, it's ruined, it's terrible. It's not the same anymore. So we manage that. So part and parcel of that is having a planning department. And the other thing is creating an HR department, creating that infrastructure. So we're very much in the same place, and so that's our history. And when we talk about projects that we can work on, my issue has been we are just trying to keep the wheels on the bus and improve the bus, and we've added some nice bells and whistles. I think we now have a very stable city staff, so I'll tell you, our structure is very similar to yours. So we have city council, 7 city council, 6 city council, 1 mayor. I report on a day-to-day basis to the mayor, but objectively to all the city council members, so that's the structure. Day-to-day management of the city falls under me, and we have more departments that help with that. So as I said, we now have a planning department, right? So when you were thinking about the Monroe Street project and the Community Justice Center and the architect teams, who can I talk to? I said, no one. No one, I don't have a planning department. Don't have anyone, can't talk to anyone. So now we have a planning department, right? So now we have an HR department. We have a finance department, we've always had that. We have a deputy city clerk who was not even hired, didn't even have that position filled when I started. We have a deputy city clerk. We have a streets department, and then of course we have our shared departments, right? So the city and the county share the animal shelter and the fire department.
Yeah, I'll let
Just
Sammy know, Sammy know that it's 2.
Okay,
There we go.
alright.
Sorry.
That's
There we
okay.
go.
So I was talking just a little bit about some of the structure of the city, and I think that that's kind of.
I'm so sorry.
So when I was having a couple this morning.
Was that the came out interview?
Okay, I was just checking, cause it wasn't working. Thank you.
Okay,
So.
I have it on my desk.
I'm sorry, that was such a.
So I do think that, sort of understanding where we are in our growth as a municipal government, we are sort of at the nascent end of creating a functional, true municipal government. I think where we were before, lots of things were just done.
Mhm.
Someone thought it'd be, 4 people wanted a stop sign at a corner, we put a stop sign in. We didn't look at warrants, we didn't look at the MUTCD, manual on uniform traffic sign. We just put a stop sign in, and it worked fine. But I think we're at a place where we expect more. We expect more of our local government to look at, are we looking at the right things? Are we just doing things and then seeing how it works? I think that's fine. But I also think we need to have the information to make the right decisions. And so I see that as my job with the city council. I don't make policy, just like you make policy. Our city council members make policy. My job is to give the city council enough information to make reasonable decisions. I think one of the things that we've emphasized lately is you are a representative democracy, as is the city council, which means you're not a pure democracy. It doesn't mean 51% of the people think it should be a stop sign. It is. You are representatives of the community and need to make the best decisions. And I think, so we are, as a city, getting to the point where, you know, we have department reports that are thorough, we have staff reports that are thorough, that explain the same issues to our city council that, you know, come up before you. Short-term rental caps, off-highway vehicle regulations. And I appreciate many of those issues we've been working together. So off-highway vehicle regulation, you have very different issues than the city had as far as regulating those. But we were included in those discussions, and I think we all came up with a good resolution on that. And that's one of those issues where when I was in Moab, that genie was way out of the bottle. Much, much, much harder to get your hands around. And I think we're 10 years ahead of that. I think so we have the advantage of being many, many years ahead of some other resort communities that have tackled some of these issues, and now we can look and see how it's been done in other communities and figure out that we may work for us or may not. So I think that I wanted to do that as explain sort of the structure of where we are in the city, where we are in the city's development. I mean, I think I purposely didn't come here with facts about this is what our budget looks like, this is these line items, these are these things, because I think that will come as you learn and work with the city. I didn't want to overwhelm you with facts and boring slides. What I wanted to do is kind of explain vision, right? So strategic partnership, we succeed when we work together, some structural information about the city, and just emphasizing that from my perspective, relationships are really important. And I think that when we work together, the community sees that. And I wanted to highlight that we're off on a great start. And so with that, I would just say, my last thing is, if there's any lesson to be learned from the book, the Leadville book that I gave you, I think the important one is that working together, right? And hearing each other and having that professional relationship, but also that cordial relationship. So with that, I'm gonna say, let's work together. And I'm open to answering any questions rather than hit you with a bunch of facts. I figured if you had any particular questions about the city or operations, anything like that, I'd just open it up to you for questions.
I remember when I moved here in the 90s, there were still signs all over town that were EPA, just go away.
Yep.
And people were not stoked still, and that was, you know, years after.
And I think that was the point. And I've read the book, and I really thought about it. I thought, why did that happen? And because there truly was an issue. I don't think today anybody would doubt that there was an issue. I think that EPA said, we know better, and we're just gonna, people felt the meetings were perfunctory, that the decisions were already made, the public meetings weren't truly to get input. And so they had 10 years of pushing and lots of local leaders trying to be at the table, lots of people with strong opinions. And that's why I was so curious to find out what was really the success at the end. And I think that's one of our keys in our community is listening, is when people come for public comment, you know, that they need to know that they've been heard. You may not agree with them. And sometimes people know that you're not gonna agree with them at the end of the day. But I think if they know that you've listened, and you said, okay, that's a good point. Okay, I heard that. I think that is a harder thing to do sometimes. Yeah, but yeah, good point. I mean, there were signs, there were t-shirts. Some of them were not that nice. Some of them had stronger wording than that, I think. Yeah.
I got a question, Laurie. Where are you at with the building by Ice Palace Park, the teen center, community center?
Yep.
What's the status and the plan for that thing?
Great question. So the community conversation that we're having around that is fantastic. So there's a group that came together, I think, at sort of the request of a number of folks. The county's involved, we have Colorado Mountain College, we have the school district, the city, and we because it's sort of recreation-ish collaboration, we're now calling ourselves the Wrecking Crew, spelled with a W. But the idea is that we have heard for so many years, there is a need for indoor space. And that was the impetus behind acquiring that building, the city acquiring that building. And then there's all kinds of moving parts, right? So the county is looking at recreation. Sounds like they're sort of sifting out and a feeling that looks like aquatics, track, fitness equipment, other types of uses. And that isn't at all what has been the idea and the vision for the other need, which is indoor, and I'm not saying it has to be the building the city acquired, but that was always the vision. Indoor, more drop-in unstructured space, right? So this has started back from many, many youth group studies and surveys. But for me, it came when Roxy Aldez, who's one of the teachers at the high school, one of her classes came to the city council and the county commission and said, we were given a project and this is our project. We've identified that the lack of indoor gathering space, community space for our youth is an issue. We'd like the city and the county to do something about it. And, I was like, yep, I think that's true. And then I heard that the building was for sale. And I thought, that's a big project to take on. But it is something, as Greg Lobby would say, we've been hearing this message for 10 years. 10 years, that we lost the bowling alley, we lost the movie theater, there's a lack of space for our youth. And so the idea was always unstructured gathering space, and so the renderings that we have are more like, and not to duplicate what the library has, like it's space where kids can go and just hang out. And families can have events at a more reasonable price. There's sometimes, in fact, this is one of the funniest things. So we own the building, and I don't know if you've been in it, but it's, inside it's an older building. And I had someone who wandered up the stairs at City Hall, and they needed to have a memorial for their dad. And they said, we were sent here. And I said, well, our building's a little rough. They're like, we're desperate. We need it on this day. There is no space available. It's important to have it on this very day. And so I took them over there and I said, and they're like, you know what? We are so desperate, we'll take it. It's got no heat, though we're gonna sweep the floor, they were gonna make it work. And that to me said, when someone's gonna take an unheated gymnasium from 1960 and make it their space, we're lacking space. And so that's the vision. It is not to duplicate anything else we're already doing. And so the way that pieces are falling into place, I think are working is so the county's got an idea of what it wants to do with the recreation, and that this would be, not anything that's duplicative, but something that offers a more unstructured place for our youth. And Roxy said this, and her class said this, that at certain hours of the day, the kids are parking at Ice Palace Park and the O'Reilly's parking lot with their heaters on, and they jump from car to car, and that's how they socialize. And we've said, that's not the best way for our youth to grow up. That's we all had whatever it was wherever you grew up, the mall, the coffee shop, whatever it was. We're lacking that space. So that's the vision for that. And then the community conversation that's happening is an analysis of what the other space that we have is, and are we utilizing that appropriately? So that's kind of where the conversation is there other space that would be useful for that purpose, or is it the building the city owns? And I think, there's always pieces that are being added to that. So LCIS, for example, being added to that next. So I guess what I would say is there's a really good, again, collaborative conversation happening in this, wrecking group to identify what we have a need. I don't think anybody disputes that there's that need. Question is, how do we fill it?
So what's the status, was there any money set aside, or, and like, what's the status of the project?
Yeah, so the city's committed money to make some just necessary repairs, like short-term repairs. And so the issue is we've gone through a long process to identify sort of design build firms. And so the city council's heard presentations from a couple of those. We'll take you from soup to nuts. They'll take you through the whole process, the grant writing and everything. So the city council did okay that being put in the budget for 2025. We applied for a DOLA grant, Department of Local Affairs grant. Unfortunately, we were not given that grant, so if you don't know the pool of money in that pot, so it's energy impact mineral assessment, I think, EIAF, extraction money. That money is being pilfered to some extent. I don't know if that's the appropriate word.
That is the appropriate word.
Okay. Pilfered to balance the general fund. So this round was very competitive, oversubscribed. We had a meeting with Randy Sneed, and she said, look, health safety projects were put forth first. So, you know, we have some tips on how to better our application. The question is, you know, do we apply again for that building? Or do we apply for, you know, potentially some other ideas? The other idea is to look at, you know, tax. Like how do we support a stable funding stream? And, you know, the city does not have a sales tax. We're one of the few cities left.
You do now. You do now.
Well, correct, we do. You're right, we do. For
We
a,
all voted for that.
yeah, and I think that's what, exactly the example is there's, you know, infrastructure needs that the community identifies, you can pass a sales tax for that. You know, there's also the opportunity of creating a recreation district, which that money could go towards recreation in general in our community, which could lift a lot of boats. So there's ideas. I think one of the things that I feel like is there's a lot of movement and a lot of moving parts, and we kind of have to see where those parts land, and how the conversations play out. We don't have any, we own the building outright. We bought it, it's a fantastic asset if you've never been there.
I've been in there for a memorial, actually.
Yeah, and
Big square room.
Yeah.
That was nice to hear.
And I think, you know, it's funny, is we did a tour of it, and a lot of folks came, and you know, some folks brought their kids, you know, the first thing they started doing? They started playing in the gym, and I was like, we don't need fancy pants, right? Sometimes we just need a place. If it is not this, that property, I think is, I can't remember if it's 18 or 13 city lots with panoramic views. I really don't think it's a difficult thing to envision something else being there. I don't wanna see it be something that's not a service to our community. That's been my thing. I don't have kids. I just think our youth here are being, let's say underserved is not the right word, almost ignored. And I'll give you, this is what I mean, I don't know, like exhibit A. So, we had some vandals break into the building. Broke in, knocked some things over, broke some plates, you know, it used to be a convention center, so there's all kinds of plates, broke a bunch of plates, bunch of stuff all over. But we found out who it was, a couple of kids. So as part of their service, they agreed to come in and clean up what mess they made. And so Lauren Barrett, who's our project manager, brought them in, you know, got them with their brooms and everything, but she said, before we start, why did you do this? Do that on theater stuff. And she's like, no, really, like what? And they're like, Leadville sucks, right? It's boring, there's nothing to do here. And she's like, so you broke in? Cause they're like, yeah, the door, there's already a window that's broken, so we just thought we'd come in. And I was like, exhibit A. Exhibit A. And she said, okay, what would you envision if you could do something? They're like, like maybe some arcades, maybe some basketball. And I was like, take that, right? Like we are actually looking at potentially criminal justice issues. Kids who get in the criminal justice system, very hard to get that, like out of that. Let's get kids in the right place, doing things, burning off some energy that's productive, not unproductive. So it's a big lift. I think it's a community, a lift. And I think the vision is we have a need. The question is, with what resources in our community do we fill it? And what's the best use of our money to fill it?
So is that in your long-term vision, your long-term plan that you just completed?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues was that we identified was through the Magellan Strategies survey we did about the sales tax is infrastructure needs. While the city council wanted to focus more immediately, honestly, I think makes sense, roads and infrastructure, the idea of infrastructure needs for the citywide is ranks very high. Yeah, so it'll continue to, I think, be a very important conversation, long-term conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sweet, there's so much potential with that space.
Yeah, and I think we moved on it so quickly because, I've been sitting there forever, year or two. And
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years.
yeah, I mean, but vacant for two, I think, was after the brewery kind of mostly moved out. But I think the issue was like we saw some potential for that to be a community asset. And the reason it had to happen so quickly is the property owner knew that, I was like maybe interested and thought about it, and they got another offer and called up on a Thursday and said, we have a really solid offer, are you still interested? And so then I was sort of, oh my gosh, are we gonna let this go, this idea, this concept? And so, I think, I don't think the city will ever, lose money on that. I mean, what was it, $850,000 for 18 city lots, panoramic views? Like, how much does a single family home cost? What I didn't wanna see was that not be something that's an asset to our community, given the adjacence to the library, the Norvelt Trail, now public transit. So I'd love to see that be in some way, shape or form a community asset.
Just an aside, I represented the mining museum when they sold it for $200,000.
Well,
I remember that.
yeah, same.
And it was offered to the city and they were like, no, don't want it.
Well, and the difference, I think, the analysis was at that time that there was too much work to be done. The property owner in between did a substantial amount of work. And, I don't know that it was the exact, price increase, that's probably market-based. But I remember there was a group that Mayor Green was a part of, and they said there was just too much work. So some of the asbestos was remediated, they did a lot of plumbing repair.
Is that the brewery thing? Is there?
I think
The ones after
it was
Yeah,
after the
they were
brewery.
Yeah, after
Oh, okay.
PB Brewing ended.
Okay. Cool. When I think of youth indoor spaces, I have this real specific scene from a movie that I remember. I'm not gonna get into it here, but I'll shoot you a clip of it when I find it. And it's like, the kids, the arcade machines in the corner, they got like a little skateboard ramp set up in another corner that's got fencing around it so the boards won't shoot into people's faces. And it was like, in a sense, it was like where all the bad kids were hanging out, but you knew where they were and they weren't getting in trouble, and it was like, I don't know, it's kinda
But
like, if I had a place like that when I was growing up, I probably would've gotten a lot less trouble, like,
Yeah.
so.
Probably would have gotten more, which you probably needed.
Well, I think that's the issue too, is I think that, I know for myself, being involved in athletics when I was in school was really, those are who my friends were. And I think that's you might have a handful of kids and one of them's the instigator. Let's go, that window's broken, let's go into that building. Those other kids probably aren't bad kids. They're probably not really gonna be the one who says, let's go break something or do something, but they're hanging out and let's get them playing basketball or running around or doing something else.
They're bored.
Well, that's what those kids said when that was, and I was like, wow, that is interesting. Interesting, and I don't think they were bad kids. I think they just were, frankly, they told us, they're bored.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, thank you, any other questions? Those are easy peasy, yeah, of course.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie.
Yeah.
Thank you for the book as well.
Yes.
Really sweet of yours.
Well, I saw you all flip to page 143, you just read that.
I did. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Alright, Brena.
I have slides and no gifts.
It's a hard follow-up, huh?
And I'm like, thanks, Laurie.
Oh.
What did you do to yourself?
I got a new name.
Oh, well, congratulations then.
Yes.
Are you able to bring up my?
Yeah.
Okay.
How's everyone doing?
I'm not gonna quietly speak
Good.
out.
Good.
I can't do
Yes, you
anything
can.
quietly.
I love your sweater so
Thank
much.
you. This wool comes from my friend's branch.
Wow.
Oh, wow, alright.
Okay. Brena Smith, Director of Lake County Public Library. Would you want me to show
Yeah, I'm
you
just
it
getting
or?
it
Oh, get it
set up.
Okay,
Things
okay.
out.
Alright, thank you. Okay. Why is it not going? Okay, then. I will not read slides to you, I will give you general overview, this is gonna be up to you to read slides later, and I know I gave you a nice hefty packet. Bye Laurie, take
Bye,
care.
Laurie. Thank you.
So the planning for the library started in 1897, and it was opened as a Carnegie Library in 1902. And then it was transferred to the county from the city in 1947. There are still books hanging out in our collection. When I'm reading, I open them up and they still have City of Leadville markings on them, which is funny.
There's some gems hiding.
Yeah, I
in
mean,
there,
most
that's
of those
for
are
sure.
gone, but there's a few hanging out. I'm like, how did I miss this? And then they, stayed in the Carnegie Library until the late '60s. Actually, 1971 is when our current building was opened. So, because they ran out of space. And our, again, our mission is to be good community partners, contribute to, community building, and to create a space for everybody. And I feel like we do a pretty good job. Libraries in general are broken down into kind of three main areas: collection, services, and programs. And I feel like we do pretty well at each of them. But this is just kind of a rundown. I'll get a little bit more in here. So our current print collection is about 30,000. We are also a Marmot library, which means that we're part of a big library consortium, which I'll talk more about in a minute. Because of that consortium, we have access to lots and lots of ebooks and audiobooks, which is on the rise in terms of usage. Sometimes people come up to me and guiltily say, they're like, I just used Overdrive. And I'm like, that's okay, you're still using the library. And I don't care how they use it. We're a little bit over for our tool collection. We're more like 207 right now. And then our library things, which includes, we have sewing machines, we have games, we have telescopes, we have craft kits, we have about 153 of those. So I have to collect statistics on all kinds of things related to our operations, because we are recipients of a grant from the state library, and in return, we give them lots of numbers. So I'm just tying up the 2024 statistics, so these are all from last year. We had 337 programs in total, with a total of 3,522 people, which we're all pretty proud of. Our checkouts, and this includes everything, like ebooks, print books, tool library, all that, a little over 27,000. We also do a lot of business in interlibrary loan, and we are what is referred to as a net lender. That means more goes out than comes in. I think that's pretty good. That means we're a good consortial member, and we also have good collections. And then last year we added 834 new borrowers, and we currently have about 4,630. Any questions about those numbers?
How hard is it to go through the plan?
I'm so in love with the library. All these numbers really tickle me.
Makes me real
new
happy
stuff
too.
does. I spent 3 years working there, so I've got a little bit of a different perspective. How has it changed in the last 10 years or so figuring out who is still here and who isn't. I remember
So
that
we
being
go-
a challenge.
Yeah, so we actually go through once a year and we clean out inactive accounts.
Okay.
So we try to keep those numbers to like active users, people that are somehow interacting with the library. Is it perfect? Probably not, but we do a pretty good job of keeping the inactive counts cleared out, so, yeah. Cause otherwise that number would be like 20,000, which
Yeah.
wouldn't make sense. And
That's 76 things checked out per day.
what was that?
76 things checked out per day. That's,
I mean, for our little community, it's a lot.
it is a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of businesses would be really happy to have 76,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Things, interactions, transactions, yeah,
transactions a day.
yeah. And, so as I mentioned, we're, Marmot Library Network member. And there are 39 member libraries from across the state. And there used to be a consortium on the Front Range called the Flatirons Library Consortium. They dissolved and they all became Marmot libraries. There's also another system referred to as Prospector, which gives us access to all the academics as well. So I always, when people get, cards, we pretty much tell them there's very little that we can't get for you. So, and it's, given the size of our collections, the interlibrary loan is really important. Marmot also handles our IT services, so they maintain all of our public workstations, our staff workstations, our software. We have to have specific compliance for the state library, network management, discounted pricing, hardware, all that good stuff. They also maintain a digital archive because we do have a big digital archive. We aren't a part of that right now, but we are looking at becoming part of that as well. So we also have a library board of trustees. Our president, Melissa Christensen, is in the back. Wave and say hi. So we have 5 members, and they're members of the community that provide advocacy for the library, general oversight. We have monthly meetings on the second Tuesday of the month, and I provide them with our monthly statistics, our monthly expenses, our budget to date, and just general updates on operations and such. So. And then we're not a big revenue generator, but real good spenders. And it's just kind of the nature of libraries. I don't know how in-depth you'd like me to go, if you have any questions.
Still don't do late fees, right?
No, never. And we don't overdo shame either. We tell people like we just want our stuff back, that's all. And we've also, one thing that was new last year is that we aren't charging for replacement costs for kids' materials. So anything from YA or the children's area, people get up to, there's a limit, I can't remember now, I think it's like 10 a year. Cause obviously we don't want people to be like, oh, we have $500 worth of books. Cause we don't have limits on how much people can check out. We say as much as you can carry or take care of. So yeah, we do keep it to a limit, but if somebody's like, oh yeah, we, lost a couple books or whatever, we just, okay, bye. So we try to make it easy and so far that's been implemented for at least 4 or 5 months now, and we haven't, it's not something that people take advantage of at all. And it's nice to be able, because we do have stuff where it's like, I swear I returned it, so we always look on the shelf and, check stuff, and we're like, check it home again, and they do, they're like, we really can't find it, and we're like, it's just gone, and we're just, and then so.
It was always like in the kids' backpacks. So
I know, I'm like, it's somewhere in that house, but whatever, it's okay, we're moving on.
Come on, please.
Yeah. So this is a, kind of overview of our current strategic plan. Collections are always on our strategic plan, and it's just part of our practice of staying up to date, with what's going on with collections and always keeping our collections fresh. Like I said, I try really hard not to find all the old city books. I think they might all be gone now. But we do want to keep our collections fresh. Because we do have such a small collection. We've been, over the last couple of years, expanding our Spanish language collection. The kids' Spanish language collection especially has a very high circulation, which is really nice. And then we'll always be, kind of updating our tool library and other things, like those are always kind of things that are ongoing. Always looking for new ways to engage our community and also like build our capacity through staff training and development, and our local history department is pretty important to us, to the community. So we have a lot of energy that goes into that, which can bring me to my next slide. So the programming coordinator is Matt Baumgartner. He reports to me, does the two deputy directors, one for local history, one for access services. And access services kind of covers all the like front of house things, circulation, that kind of thing. And she also does the, here's another board member, there's Renia. So she also does, all the collection development for the kids area and story time and a lot of the kids programming. And the marketing coordinator, Lisa, also reports to me. Our library assistants, which is Stephanie Puebla and Julian Sandoval, also report to Becky. And then our Spanish services coordinator, Lydia, also reports to Becky. And then all the local history staff report to Jen, which is AJ Brokaw and Emma Carey. Becky finished her master's in library science about 1.5 years ago. Emma finished hers last spring, and then I have mine, and then Matt is working on his, which is nice to have professional folks in there. Any questions about staff or organizational structure? Going once, going twice. Okay. And here's a cute picture of everybody looking silly in the library. And the question, what do we wish everybody knew? Everybody is pretty dedicated to community building and to delivering really excellent services and collections. I feel really lucky to have a really great crew. And when people give me compliments on the library, I'm like, it's them. They're the ones out there like, boots on the ground doing stuff. And I also have a really great board as well. And then, so that's that. And then I also did want to make you aware of a very large donation. I know that John McMurtry, I'm like, darn it, I wanted to tell them. So we did receive a very large donation last winter by surprise. Somebody left us in their will. And we are currently in the process of trying to build an endowment out of that to help with capital projects mostly. So that's the plan right now. It's still in progress, but let me know if you all have any questions about that.
John McMurtry from Seven?
Yeah, he's from the community fund. He's the director of the community fund, because right now that money is sitting in our community fund account, so. And we are working on, building a more, long-term plan. Right now, we're just trying to get it to not sit in a bank account, and so it's actually like earning some money out there. But that money is not intended to go towards operations. Right now, the plan is to split it into two funds, one that's kind of a more high yield account that we don't access very often, and then a small one to help us fund our author talks like Banned Books Week, and right now I'm trying to get Pam Houston up here, so I'm trying.
I just got
Love it,
chilled.
yes.
Can you share how much of it?
Yes, the check was $252,787 and $252,787.52. That was the check. So, it was a surprise. We were in this woman's will. We got $5,000 last spring, and that we put towards some programming stuff. And they said in the letter, they said when the estate is dissolved, it will be divided among all the recipients that were in her will. I really did not expect anything, and then in December, got this package from from FedEx, and initially I was, I knew right away, I was like, oh, I bet this is the, they must have like wrapped up that estate and just some paperwork, and I opened it up and like this check just kind of comes tumbling out. It was like an old school check, so like it was all written out, which was kind of, I found a little amusing, but
Old school.
yeah.
I still do that.
Well, no, I mean, it's like that, a check that big,
Oh,
written
yeah, yeah.
on like a, kind of written in teeny
Oh, yeah,
tiny
yeah.
letters so it fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was kind of, I do old school checks too, but no, it was funny, you would expect like a check from the bank or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. It was pretty cool.
Wow.
So, but yeah, that is going on, and then the other thing that is, we are just having discussions about how we can partner. We already have a partnership with the Civic Center Association, the Lake County Civic Center Association, and for the Heritage Museum, we host some of their digital collections and manage them for them. So if people want to purchase images or whatever, we handle that for them. And so we are talking about more ways that we can support their operations and
Nice.
such. So yeah, cool. Yeah, so that's that. Any questions? And we're pretty straightforward. We do stuff. Check out books. We do programs. Yeah.
Cool.
I love everything about the library.
Thank you.
Especially,
Appreciate
I'm very grateful to have you on board, Brena.
Thank you.
And you've been here for a minute now.
Yeah, it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
It was 7 years this January, so. Yeah.
I've loved what you've made our library into.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm still afraid to go back into the library in Golden, cause I have late fees. And I'm worried that my name is like on a wanted poster.
All of shame.
Well,
Yeah.
what was so funny is like I was calling a friend of mine. She was in the car with her daughter, and my name came up, and her daughter was immediately like, "Oh, it's Brena. She's mad about my overdues." I'm like, I first of all, if we don't keep track, I mean, that's what people are like. I'm sorry, it's different. I'm like, we don't go into the into our system. I'm like, who are the overdue?
It helps people.
We do for the tool library, that's the only thing that we do,
Yeah.
because we have limitations, like if they have more than 3 overdues, they lose tool library privileges for 6 months. So that is one thing we do keep track of.
Brena, what's the state of the structure itself? Is the roof good? Besides
Yeah,
the
so the
paint?
building itself, I mean, it needs a little TLC. I do have a punch list that I've given Michael, like we could probably use a new paint job. There's some rotting around the windows, but he thinks that there's asbestos there, so we need to get it. Our building is full of asbestos. And making it hard to do anything. But this, I mean, it's probably one of the with the exception of the annex now, that looks beautiful. It's functioning. It's as far as I know, the roof's good. We're just out of space.
You guys cleaned out the downstairs yet?
Oh yeah, it's looking good. Oh yeah, it's like a full-on archive down
Wondered
there now.
what hidden treasure were waiting
Oh yeah,
down
we got rid of a lot of stuff in
there. A lot of old stuff.
yeah, there was definitely some hoarding going on, but we've tried to, because we just need the space, so we're just like, do we really need this thing? Well, no, we need the space, so. I feel like we've puzzled out that place and shifted stuff around probably as much as we can at this point, like we are 100% out of space. So, one of our biggest requests is for study rooms. Meeting room space, we can provide it to like nonprofits, local government groups and stuff, but we don't let businesses use it and we don't let individuals use it, which is a shame because we have the baby dough room, but there aren't really windows into that room, and if there was a way to get windows in there, I would definitely let people use it, but it's a tough space. It's very echoey. So
But
if
the
people
building's 120 years old?
No. Our current library, it opened in 71.
I see it, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's the Carnegie Library. Yeah,
I have
that
a
was.
stupid question, I'm a dumb one.
It's okay. But yeah, so that's the library. If you guys ever wanna come to programs or anything, I can keep you guys posted on some of our bigger programs, yeah. So we are hosting for our Band Books Week celebration in October, we are hosting Jason Reynolds. Yeah, so if you wanna come by, we give out books, we got a really cool grant from tourism, I don't know where Adam ran off to. To be cause we usually, what we do is we'll buy like a box of books to be able to give away up until the event, and then at the event is when we start selling them, just to kind of help with some cost recovery. But this year we got a grant to give out books, and we also, cause we have the 5th grade classes are coming over for our class visits, and so like every 3 weeks we have one of the 3 classes, and they've been really great, and we have a really great relationship with the teachers, who's also a board member, and because they've just been really good partners with us, Matt and I marched over there and gave all the 5th graders books, which was really fun. So yeah, with little things put in them that said, tell your parents to come. So, and then we'll follow up with them when they're in 6th grade, and then we'll just see what we can do about getting books for the next 5th grade class. So, but yeah. But I can happily keep you posted on big events that will happen. So, yeah. Any other questions, comments, anything? If you wanna come in I know you know the library pretty well, and you do too, but you probably haven't seen the behind the scenes for a while.
No, I have not been anything but a customer
Yeah.
for 10 years, 12 years. Yeah, it's been a while.
Well, if you guys want a tour of the library, just hit me up.
Thank you.
All right, carry on.
Thank you, Brena.
Okay.
Thank you, Brena.
Thank you, Brena.
See ya.
I'm sorry.
You missed it.
I had to step out, I thought I moved the window because it was cold, but it's always a trillion degrees.
I know, it's always a million degrees in here. Okay, thanks.
Should we turn the fans on?
Bye, everybody, have a great day.
Bye, Brena.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.
Mandy,
This one.
you ready?
Do you have a presentation?
I didn't get
Just
it. Informal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I sit up here?
Sure.
Hey, Adam, could you open that second door too?
Yeah.
Please. Thank you.
Hi,
Hello.
nice to meet you all. I'm Mandy Kaisner, I'm with SolVista Health. I don't know if you're familiar with our organization yet, but I just wanted to come talk to you today about some of the services that we have, and then obviously give you my contact information if you have any questions about anything happening in behavioral health that you're curious about. We have what we do every single year is a community impact statement, so it sort of shows all of the services that we offer, particular in Lake County. So anyway, so I'm Mandy Kaisner. I actually started in Lake County before I even had seen the building back in 2005. I was your primary and only treatment provider back in the day, and have been with SolVista for close to 20 years now. So really enjoy community mental health. It really is about being the safety net for the community. So a lot of what we do is we see people without insurance, we see people who are underinsured, we see people with access to Medicaid insurance. We do take commercial insurance, especially in Lake County, because we tend to have a higher population with people with private insurance, and they really want us to be their provider. But at times we do drill down on the private insurance when access to care starts to be impacted, to really prioritize those most in need, and then we connect those people with private insurance to other private local providers. One of the things that's happened post-COVID is that we have seen a dramatic change in the use of telehealth services. So when I last checked, about 75% of all of our services right now are done through telehealth, which is, an interesting thing. The one thing though is that youth in particular really require and demand to be seen in person, which also feels really good. So we prioritize all of our in-person people that we have at SolVista to be more youth and family focused. We do have some providers who do see adults, but a large amount of our in-person providers are youth and family focused. Again, we serve about 4,000 people per year, so we serve the region of Lake, Chaffee, Fremont, and Custer counties. So that's our service area. That used to be more significant than it is now because all of our service regions are actually changing, and they'll change again come July, where we will be aligned with most of the western half of the state of Colorado and the southern half. So again, that because of telehealth, we really do see more than just those 4 counties. The other thing that we started recently was our regional assessment center that is housed out of Salida in the last couple of years. We are currently providing most all of the evaluations at St. Vincent's, and then work with Jonathan and his team to help coordinate people getting down to the regional assessment center and then getting back when needed to provide care. Do you have any questions about what the regional assessment center is, or should I do an overview of that facility?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a walk-in facility where 24 hours a day, people can access either emergency evaluations or acute treatment and withdrawal management. So we've got 6 beds dedicated to acute treatment and then 6 beds dedicated to withdrawal management. And by licensure requirements, those have to be divided and segregated. So it is not a locked facility, it's like a delayed egress facility so that if people want out, they have the ability to get out.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that we chose on a acute treatment unit, withdrawal management unit model is because that serves about 80% of what we're seeing in terms of acute mental health need. We do still have occasionally where people need a higher level of care and we have to send them outside of our valley. But again, that's few and far between. It really is serving the majority of who we see and need in acute crisis, which feels actually really good. And I can follow up to get you specific information on lake access to that, but that seems to be a really good working relationship. And the reason we chose Salida, it's just central to our region. So it's about an hour from Leadville, it's about an hour from West Cliff, it's about an hour from Canyon City. And then same thing with Park County, we've got a lot of people who come in from Park and Alamosa counties. Before that was developed, we basically had nothing for people in acute, needing acute care. So people would be sitting in our emergency rooms for days sometimes, not getting access to care. And then we'd ultimately have to send them off to Denver, far away from loved ones, and then they'd come back into our community and they just didn't really get a lot of help in that model. So that's exactly why we decided to build that locally. Really good stories coming out of that. So one thing about SolVista is that we've expanded tremendously. So when I first started, we had less than 50 employees for 4 counties. And again, I was your only treatment provider back in 2005. Now we've got close to 200 employees across 4 counties. Feels like we've done a much better job of just increasing access to care, increasing service delivery, and then expanding the types of services that we offer at SolVista. So we offer everything from prevention, early intervention, to acute care, 24/7 level of care.
Does acute care include inpatient?
Yes.
So that is
We
inpatient.
can't call it inpatient, but yes, it's 24/7.
Okay.
And that's just a regulation thing.
Okay.
But yes, people do stay there for up to 14 days.
Got it.
Yeah.
I just heard the need for inpatient care. And so I was just wondering if it was the same thing or different.
it's a little bit different just
Yeah.
in terms of the regulation side.
Yeah.
Inpatient care can be a place where people are on an M1, so they're on an involuntary hold, and then they're held for anywhere up to 30 days. But again, that our need in the 4 counties was mainly to serve that 80%.
Yeah.
There are always gonna be those maybe 10 people. I would like to have better data on who actually needs inpatient, who has to get sent out of our region, and I'm working with the team to get more information on that, just so that we have accurate numbers. That's how it works now. Somebody's in our ED here acutely. The Regional Assessment Center, nurse practitioners and clinicians will do their evaluation, televideo, and then we arrange for transportation down to that facility and then back obviously to their home. Any other questions on the Regional Assessment Center? What else do I wanna tell you? Right now, what we're really focused in on is access to care. There's been this kind of buzzword for like access to care but a lot of our regulation has been based on access to assessment. So one of the regulatory requirements in mental health for a long time is that the first appointment that we have with somebody is doing this very lengthy comprehensive assessment. And assessment is fine, but it's not the only thing. An example that I've been given is this last year, my daughter had a rash. And of course, as a mom, I tried to treat the rash at home. I did not succeed at that. Actually, it blew up. And the next week when I took a look at it, I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to get into urgent care. I got to get her in. This rash was out of control. This Neosporin was not working. And imagine I would have went into urgent care, walk-in, and they would have sent me home with something that's saying, oh, thank you, Miss Kaisner, your daughter has a rash. I need you to schedule a follow-up appointment for 2 weeks from now to get the ointment, to get the treatment. That's what we've been doing in mental health. Because of our regulation and because of what we're required to do. So what we're trying to do is work with our behavioral health administration to reduce some of those barriers so that it does feel like access to care, not access to assessment. So that people can get assessed briefly, but then also get that ointment, get that level of care. Because if you're a worried parent and you've been waiting to take your child in to get care, you're gonna want them to get actual care that first time, not just assess that your child has depression, something that you already knew as a parent or you suspected as a parent, and then get sent home to wait 2 weeks before that level of care is provided. So that's really what we're doing. We've been working on all of our data so that we have ultimately a dashboard where our community partners can actually go in and see exactly how we're doing on access to care. So that people, when there's rumors going around that, oh my gosh, it takes weeks to get in, that we can show instantly that no, it's quick. We can offer within 7 days right now. So right now we are offering urgent care appointments, so within 24 hours. If you have an emergency need, we're offering that within 2 hours. And then routine, we're averaging around 8, we'd like to get less than 7. But we're doing pretty good with access, but it's only because we've been really intently focusing on moving that dial in the right direction. Most recently, which I'm really excited about, so I just took over as CEO of SolVista back in mid-June. And one of the things I really wanted to do is get a youth advisory council going. And we just started that in January. So we had our first meeting with our youth advisory team, which if anybody knows of a youth who has a lived experience who wants to get involved with mental health, please send them my way. We've actually got an application on our website for them to apply to become a youth advisory member.
What age range?
Right now, we're trying to focus on mostly high school, but we're not opposed to middle school, high school range. But we met with them and we're taking all of our assessments and information, we're walking through all of our processes, we're getting direct feedback from their experience about like, what does this feel like to come into a mental health center and experience all this paperwork, and how can you help advise us on what we need to do? And one of the things they really want to bring back, which is something we did several years ago, is the mental health voucher. So this was a youth-led initiative that the youth came up with completely and came to me with their idea. They wanted to create a voucher where they gave 2 free sessions for any youth to come in with this piece of paper and basically say that you get 2 free sessions with a counselor, free of charge. It's huge. And they wanna bring it back. And so that may be something that we're campaigning for to help us fund it, because these, it's tight times right now. But they just feel like the amount of pressure that it takes to talk to your parent about being able to afford care. That's a hard conversation, and it makes youth prevent themselves from accessing care, so
Big barrier.
it's a huge barrier. And then the paperwork on top of it.
Yeah.
It's like they finally get there, so again, we want that, the intent of the youth voucher would actually be to provide care, prevention, intervention, give them some coping skills, meet with them 2 times, and then if they need more treatment or if they're high risk, involve their parent, get them involved to get them into longer term care. But at least have 2 free sessions of care. So that feels really, I'm excited about bringing that back.
What about at the state level? I thought that there was money provided for students to be able to get mental.
There is an iMatter program, actually that was modeled off of the youth voucher,
Oh, cool.
which is so cool. But it's all telehealth.
Oh.
And so
okay.
our youth, we had a provider who actually had time slots to sign up to be a youth, an iMatter provider. It's just our youth here in this region do not want telehealth. They want in-person appointments.
That's fair.
So again, I'm a huge fan of iMatter, it's just our youth have not utilized it.
Okay. And is there a way we could try to advocate for that money to be no longer connected to telehealth?
Well,
Like, could we?
that's a good question. So a recent conversation I had with the school-based programs right now. So we get money from the BHA, that's the Behavioral Health Administration, to support school-based funding. Except right now it's written to be mostly consultation with teachers. And I've asked that the language be including prevention and early intervention, so that there is more flexibility with that funding, so that we could use some of that funding. Cause that seems like an easy win.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our schools also, they don't just want consultation with teachers, they want direct service. They want us seeing their kids. Cause we've got 2 providers today out in the schools right now seeing people, so.
Cool.
A great question. Any opportunity, I will let you know.
Please
Because-
do, yeah.
Yeah, cause that's just something that's really important.
May I ask, so, I'm sorry, I thought I heard in the beginning that you said 75% of SolVista's services are telehealth?
Yes.
And then I'm hearing from iMatter that most of the services that children and youth want are in person. So how do you have goals or plans to move from a telehealth model to more of an in-person model?
For youth and families, we are in
Okay.
person. Yes.
Okay.
So overall, that's everybody we serve. Out of everybody we serve right now, in the last month, I think it's calculated every 6 weeks, about 75.6% of our people were served via telehealth. All of our youth programming is focused on in-person.
Okay.
That was one lesson learned from COVID, is that all of our youth dropped out of services for the most part, and we had to get back in the community as soon as possible. So we've got 2, for Leadville, we've got 2 in-person school-based people that go into schools. One also sees some adults. And then we just hired in the last month a bilingual telehealth provider who's also willing to see youth. But again, she's telehealth. And then we've also got, in town today too, is our youth crisis resolution team. So we've served, that's a pilot program that's offered by the state, we've served 12 kids in Lake County this last year. 11 out of those 12 have not re-entered the crisis system, so it's been a really big success. And basically what those teams do is like when we have an encounter with youth in Lake County that is in crisis, we send out a youth crisis resolution team, which is a master's level clinician and a peer, to go out into the community, into the home, into the schools, meet with that youth and family until that crisis is resolved and try to keep them out of further crisis resolution. And if you ever wanna meet with that team, I'm happy to bring them here with me to meet with them. They were doing some really cool stuff. Again, that was a pilot program that started a year and a half ago, that hopefully we can keep funding for, because I think it's a really unique program.
Cool.
Does that answer? What are other things that I can tell you about SolVista and what we're doing? Oh, we've got a member advisory council too. So if anybody has a lived experience and we're looking for lake recruits, we also have a member advisory council. You don't have to be a client of SolVista, but you do have to have some type of lived experience, a family member with lived experience with behavioral health. And again, we've got applications for that. And those are all the people that are helping us to really keep that client perspective in mind. We're reviewing all of our assessment paperwork, all of our enrollment paperwork with them. They come into our lobbies and tell us what's friendly, what's not friendly, just give us advice about some of the things that we could change or we could do better at. And then we focus on those things, and then they give us feedback as to whether or not they feel that we've addressed those problems.
What does that mean exactly, lived experience with?
So you've experienced depression, anxiety, or you've had a family member with some type of a substance use or a mental health problem in your life. So you could speak to that client experience. So they help drive and guide what we do at SolVista. So if we have a big change, like for example, I talked to you about access to care, we'd like to move away from doing those comprehensive long assessments at the first time we meet somebody. So we've adjusted our assessment to more of an abbreviated assessment. We take that in front of that team and then they give us feedback. Like, what are we missing from that? Is this doing the job? Could we eliminate more? Out of what would you want your first experience at SolVista to be like? Is what we literally just did this last time we met. And then they give us advice, suggestions.
From your vantage point, what are some of the largest contributing factors to people needing SolVista's care?
And like other environmental factors or just sky's the
Saying that
limit?
sky's the limit,
Yeah.
you have a profession,
Yeah.
an industry in which you live.
Yeah.
But we are a community and environment of people. Like, what are the contributing factors out there that need people to come to SolVista for care?
I think economic stress largely, the just needing more family supports, having more, we've got a lot of families who have to travel a lot, so there's a large commute time. I think that we don't get a lot of one-on-one time with youth. Or there's a limited amount of time with parents, caregivers. Financial health is huge for a lot of our families. Multi-generational families, we've got grandparents raising youth. And I think for youth, there's just a lot of stress with social media, with that just constant exposure of being out there and being exposed. I think kids sense, and this is what our youth advisory council was talking about, kids sense that there's additional stress at the home. Worried about finances, worried about all the change. And I think if anything, they've said that it makes it difficult for them to access care at times, and then things just get worse until the point where they do need to access crisis services. That was the example that was shared. And I went home from that meeting, and my daughter was making macaroni and cheese that weekend. And I was like, I just had went to the store a couple days before, and I was like, Rubes, I thought you were gonna make mac and cheese. Ruby's my daughter. And she's like, well, we don't have milk, Mom. And I was like, well, I could get you milk, just, put it on the thing. She's like, I didn't want to stress you out about it. And I was just like, it was just that perfect moment of like, I've left that meeting with the Youth Advisory Council, and they're telling me about the stress about, accessing care. And my daughter didn't want to put milk was missing from the fridge, just, so anyway, that was kind of a moment that I was like, and I was like, Rubes, I can get you milk. We could run out now to make sure that there's adequate mac and cheese rations in the house, but anyway, it was just a moment where I was like, yeah, they're right on.
They're trying.
They're trying so hard.
There's been a lot of talk about ski towns and suicide rates. What do you think it is, the connection there? That, and sorry, that's a hard subject. I didn't mean to just kind of drop that on the rim, but.
We're literally in mental health.
Yeah.
It's okay.
But like, what are like some of the biggest challenges, or maybe let me rephrase this, what are successes you think ski towns have had in combating that kind of trend that's just, it's really horrible to hear about, like, you think of these places as a fun place to be, but really beneath the surface there's this deep underlying current of people who are just like really at the end of the road.
Right. I mean, we do see that. We see that in a large rancher, the isolation factor, I think, is huge. People are largely, working part-time, doing the winter months or doing the rafting summer season. So I think the biggest thing that we've been successful with in the last couple of years is engaging our ski community. So, and we're happy to do any type of collaboration. So last September, we put on a movie, and I can't think of the movie right now to save my life, but it was basically all about educating people about suicide risk. And so, and again, we did that in partnership with Monarch Mountain. And then we did a little tour in each of our, we came up to Leadville too, to show that film, to talk about the impact of suicide. I think that what we really need communities to do is embrace that suicide is all of our problems. So we see a staggering amount of people who never even access mental health care who end up completing suicide. And that to us signals that we need to do a better job of getting the word out there, teaching people how to have these conversations that feel really difficult for people at times. So we do a ton of mental health first aid. So if you haven't had a mental health first aid class, sign up for one, or if you want us to come here, we'll do those. We do QPR too, which is question, persuade, refer, which is a shorter training program that teaches people how to have these questions, how to get people to the right person that they need. We do a huge campaign, which is called Be the One, which is basically, we're trying to say, if somebody's in front of you and they're talking about things that you are questioning whether or not they want to live, we want you to empower people to be the one to be able to ask that question. So the campaign is like, be the one, ask the question. And we've got, we do engage with some local restaurants and things to try to get that information. But again, wherever you don't see information on suicide prevention, or you have an idea, we've have an entire team, a suicide prevention team that is working, and we'd love to collaborate, is what I'm saying. So let's do something about that, because it does make me sad.
I think I've also seen data around suicide rates in mountain towns that like coincide with mountain closing. So you lose your job, you lose your healthcare, you might lose your housing, like it's so much more environmental than just, oh, I have depression, so I'm at risk for suicide. It's like your social support structure crumbling also. That having that seasonality
Yes.
to access to a job or meaningful work or your community is a big impact too.
Huge,
It's a tough transition in the spring for ski area workers.
yeah. Not knowing what's next, you know, how you're gonna make your next paycheck, and a lot of people are sleeping on people's couches already. Or in tents, or, you know. Yeah, in the car.
I had one question. I saw West Springs Hospital in Grand Junction close. Did you send many folks there, or are you mostly like Denver, Colorado Springs focused? Like, does that impact our access to higher levels of care at all?
We haven't sent many people there. Again, I'd like to have that data. I'd like to say we've had to send maybe 20 people over the last year out of this entire region to a higher level of care.
Okay.
So I feel like the acute treatment unit, withdrawal management unit is really doing a good job, but again, I've asked for that data. And I've also asked the hospitals to help provide that data just so that we can know, like, are we getting everyone? I think we're getting everyone because we're providing the evaluations. So we would know, because we're the ones that help find placement if somebody needs a higher level of care, but I just wanna make sure that our data is accurate.
It might be helpful to reach out to some of the county DHS offices, because I know we've had to send some units
Youth,
to higher levels of care
okay,
from child welfare, so
okay,
it'd be helpful to
Yeah,
get a
sure.
full picture.
Outside the ski area, I think another at-risk group is veterans. Is there like anything you guys do in collaboration with like the VA or anything like that, or is that a whole separate entity and they do their own thing and?
No, we were fortunate enough to receive a federal grant that allowed us to hire a veterans liaison. Cause that is something that we could do better, that we did a community needs assessment, and that was one thing that the community and us agreed on, that we could do better outreach. So we've got a veterans liaison hired. We've been coordinating a lot with Mount Carmel out of Custer County. I would like to see more coordination in other regions, but they've just got a very active veteran program in Custer County. They're doing really cool things that I think we could model here. A lot of peer-led programs. And so I think if we engaged our veteran community, that we could just model some of the things that they've got going down at Custer and bring them to Lake. So if somebody that's part of our screening, if somebody identifies as having military service, active or retired, then they automatically get connected to the veterans liaison. So that we ensure that we're doing our best to engage that individual. And the veterans liaison is also somebody with military experience.
Do they provide direct care, or are they just like an advocate?
Yeah, they're just an advocate. Cool.
How much of your work, I understand that you all, in your acute care, you also have withdrawal management, but how much of your work is around substance use? Like, for instance, if somebody needs prolonged care, are people coming through SolVista? Or are you just using acute care withdrawal, a section for that?
Yeah, so withdrawal management is usually less than 7 days. So that was one thing in the first year of having that unit. We realized, well, we need to beef up our, and I'm sorry for any vegetarians, I do use beef up terms, I'm from Chicago. But we need to beef up our transitions of care. So it did feel like people were getting left out with a great plan, but then there was no follow-up.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do now is we've got a team of people who are actually trying to meet with the individuals before their discharge and getting them enrolled in care prior to them even leaving the unit. So again, that's kind of in its infancy, but that is an area that we were like, oh, this doesn't, a lot of people aren't following that up.
Right.
So we are gonna do our best to just engage them while they're there, get them enrolled, so again, there's not those barriers to care.
And you're getting them enrolled in mental health
Yes,
services. Substance use services.
So we're trying to build an intensive outpatient program right now with our substance use team, which is really exciting, but we would like the ability, and that's 9 or more services a week. Right now, I'd say we're doing more enhanced, where we've got groups and things that people could take advantage of, but when we need to, we'd like to be able to offer at least 9 or more services a week for people who really do need that step down intensive level of care.
Do you get referrals from probation? Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so we do a lot of outpatient services, substance use services. We're trying to move away from like DEI education, DUI education.
I was like, girl, what do you do?
No, wrong word also on my mind right now.
DUI.
DUI education, so that we can focus more in on providing treatment, because we do have some DUI educators here, so.
Cool.
Great questions, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, and any type of information that you're wanting from your community mental health center, just please let me know, or if there's something that's come across your desk and you want to know, my mobile's on the card, so just text me and I will drop everything to let you know what my opinion is. You don't have to agree with it, but there's a lot happening in behavioral health that should have some conversation, so that's it.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy.
Yeah.
Putting it in the phone.
You have a good day, Mandy, thanks again.
You can stay there wherever you're most
What would you
comfortable.
like? What would they like?
Alright, Gary, how's it going, man?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Right.
Well, I tell you what, you're really,
Oh,
you're making Excel's margins today with the heat here.
I know, really.
Lord.
We wish you were our provider.
We wish we were your provider as well.
I've worked with you guys before, it is an absolute pleasure.
Oh.
The opposite is an
Thank you.
absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's just,
Well, so thank you very much for those kind words. And so, purpose of today's meeting, and I appreciate the time, is just to come up and introduce myself. This is Chris McGinnis. She is the Manager of Communications and Community Relations. I'm the CEO, Gary Kelly. And all three of you, I was here about 18 months ago, and presented to the board a little bit of some of the stuff I'm gonna talk about today. But just wanted to introduce who Sangre is. We do serve a portion of Lake County. We obviously don't serve into Leadville itself, but we have about 1,100 meters in Lake County down here. So we are part of the community up here. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you a little bit. I don't have gifts either, but I do have slides and they're riveting, so I'll keep you awake. So again, thank you very much for giving me the time. I'm gonna cover some, and then Chris will cover a little bit as well. How do I advance here? Right there? Okay. A little bit about Sangre. Who knows what an electric co-op is? Do you know what an electric co-op is, young lady?
We haven't.
I mean, I feel like I can guess.
Okay, well, it kind of says a little
It's a
bit,
co-op.
co-op, I mean,
Yeah.
kind of, everybody knows REI is a co-op, so. But we're a co-op, we we're not for profit, not to be confused with a nonprofit. So, some people call us a nonprofit, that's a little different. But we've been in business since 1940. We were incorporated, and we serve 5 counties there. We have 15,000 meters throughout those counties. We include Saguache. We don't have a lot of, 100 meters maybe down in Saguache, but it's a small little piece of our service territory. We're governed by a 7-member board. We have 2 that are the rural, what we call rural lake, Chaffee Lake, meaning you have to live in one of those areas, either rural Chaffee or lake. One of the former commissioners here, Jeff Fiedler, sat on our board. He was, but he was an at-large board member, which means you can live anywhere within our service territory. We have 2 of those. We have one in the town of Buena Vista, and one in Fremont County, and one in Custer County. A little bit of, we have about 1,800 miles of overhead, of energized line that is both overhead and underground. One of the things you'll hear when people talk about the co-op world is how many people they have or how many consumers they have per mile. Just because many co-ops are very, very rural. As you can see there, we're 7.7. You go over far eastern Colorado, over in the Junta, those areas, they're like 1.8 consumers per mile. But you go up into kind of like the Brighton area where United Power is, they're 50, 60, they're very high. So, but that's just something that they talk about. We're headquartered in Buena Vista. We're right on the north end there. We literally moved back into our building. We've had to vacate our building for about 5 months. We actually were sharing some buildings with SolVista, so they were our neighbors, so I knew who they were a little bit. We were kind of loud, and so we tried keeping it down for them. But we had to vacate because we did a major renovation on our heating and cooling, lighting, and a whole bunch of other things, so yes. That's kind of a picture of our service territory, as you can see all the way up at the top. As you come up the highway, Highway 24, you'll go by a big station called Malta. We do not own that, XL owns that, but our power actually flows through that station and flows down the valley there. And then we go all the way down in past Custer County and then into the West Cliff, Silver Cliff area. We do not serve West Cliff or Silver Cliff. If you can see that horseshoe right there at that southern end, that little white section, that's West Cliff, Silver Cliff. We serve all around it, but Black Hills Energy serves that, so. One of the things that we're very proud of is supporting our counties. And so we have, in the past 2.5 years, we've spent about $1.5 million here in Lake County, improving our wildfire prevention program, as well as, which also serves to improve service reliability. So we spend some money. With something else we like to say is we pay taxes here. We've spent, as you can see, $38,000 in taxes, 1,100 active meters. That's approximate here in Lake County. And the other thing that we're very proud of, and like many utilities, we're there 24/7, 365, and so I'm going to let Chris briefly talk. One of the things we're very proud of is our charitable giving.
Yeah, so we are really proud of these programs, most of which are funded really creatively. We can see grants from our business partners. When a co-op makes margins, it's issued back to capital credits. Sometimes the capital credits are donated back to us or unclaimed, so that goes towards these. So I'm proud of funding the majority of these, not through our members' bills, but through this additional source of revenue outside of that. So we provide generally about 16 post-high school scholarships a year. They're about $2,000 each. You can reapply. We do one 4-year $2,000 scholarship. The criteria for that includes being a dependent or an actual member of the co-op. So we'd love to see more Lake County applicants, I would say, on that. We have a matching grant program that we'd also like to see utilized more in Lake County. What that entails is if you are a co-op member, you can donate what you wish, but up to $200 will be matched by us to a 501c3 in the region. So examples of that could be, I'm thinking of Lake County examples, but Friends of Brown Canyon, the Alliance Against Domestic Abuse, the Heritage Museum down there, those are very popular, so you can kind of equate. And those don't have to be, so for example, those could be in Leadville if you were a member in Twin Lakes and you were donating to something, for example. Do a lot of corporate donations, we do a fair number up here. Power of Change program, our members elect to round their bill up to the nearest dollar, and we take those cents, and that's gonna amount to less than $12 per member a year, but we take that money, and that gets pooled to go into our community grants. We sponsor an annual Washington DC youth tour. We're sending 4 high school sophomores. They all ended up being from Buena Vista this year. Shine Your Light is a program that is utilized when we realize one of our members has fallen on hard times, like somebody's had a terrible car wreck or a serious illness and they're not able to pay their bill. We can usually help them out through that. And we're happy to do safety demonstrations, primarily in schools, but we can come to other events if you'd like to give us a call, we'll book that.
Do you work with the Lake County School District to let them know about all the grant opportunities for
We
scholarships?
do, we contact everybody, but one of the criteria here is you need to be a member, so it's gonna be
Sure.
kids that live in Beaver Lakes, Mount Massive, south of Fiedler's house.
Yeah.
Morning Star, so that narrows it up here admittedly.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, again, Chris said it, and something I'd like to just reemphasize that we we give a lot of money, but it does not come out of, it's not a budget line item on
Or general.
and general funds. So we get creative, like Chris said, the unused capital credits, people donate the capital credits, we get donations from, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tri-State. Tri-State is our G&T there, our transmission and generation provider, headquartered in Westminster. They're a co-op as well. They give grant money. We get money from another G&T out of South Dakota or North Dakota Basin. They give us money for our scholarships and various charitable givings. It just makes us feel really good. I think we just awarded scholarships this year, and I think last month we awarded the Washington DC Youth Tour. So I think those notifications generally go out in the late winter, December timeframe, so mark your calendars. If you know of somebody in our service territory that's, and then it could already be in college, I believe, so if they haven't applied, they still could, so. Something that I'm very, very proud of, so. Just moving on to tell you a little bit about our system is vegetation management, fire mitigation, that is on everybody's mind throughout, the West, I would say. And so about 3 years ago, we took a very proactive approach, and we were way behind. We had minimal budget, we kept having more outages, and we were just doing the bare minimum cutting. So we implemented, a very aggressive vegetation management program. We funded it, we knew we couldn't do it with the current budget, so we put in what's called a rate rider. Essentially, it's a line item on your bill that says, that money goes for wildfire, and vegetation management. We're about halfway through, I'll talk a little bit more about that. And ultimately, that rate rider will fall off, but we're about halfway through. Currently, the rate rider is $8 a month. So if you were a Sangre member, you would see that $8. We've had overall, nobody likes to pay more, but overall, we've been very supported by our membership. And I'll show you some pictures that I think, paint 1,000 words. So we took on this program, instead of doing the bare minimum cutting, we decided we were gonna do 10 to 15 year, maybe even 20-year cuts. A lot of utilities, Excel being one, they'll come back and they just trim. We're essentially cutting. We're taking out trees. A lot of Excel, they'll just come in and just cut off the branches. They'll be back 3 to 4 years later, cutting those same branches. So we're taking a much more aggressive approach, especially in our rural service territories, that they have really been welcomed by most of the landowners, just because it does, we clear all the fuel, and power line corridors make great fire breaks. So firefighters like them, even though they don't like the power lines, but they do like that fire break. So some of the things we've also taken, Integrity Tree, I didn't say that. We awarded the contract to a company called Integrity Tree. They're actually headquartered out of Michigan, but they developed a presence here in Colorado. I think all their employees are Colorado people, so it's not like they're importing people. And so they come in and just really do a great job cleaning up, cutting trees. We've applied for several grants through either the federal, Department of Energy. There's some other RUS grants. We were successful in getting a grant through the State Forest Department. It was $495,000. It was primarily based on Custer and Fremont counties. And so we were able to get there. We don't have to necessarily use all that money there, but that's where the money was focused. So we put all the money back into the same pot. Our line crews do cutting as well. They do line patrol, so we're really trying to take a very proactive stance. Come later this year, we will go into a more, especially when it's dry, and we watch the weather. Chris has become kind of a notifier of when certain things happen, through the red flag stuff, and anyway, we'll start placing our devices on what we call one shot, so they don't reclose. If the line falls down, it's not going to reclose and possibly start a fire.
I mean, if I can.
Sure.
If ever, most of the emergency managers kind of handle this, about it, but, please call us if you need matching funds for work to apply for grants. A lot of the entities in Chaffey County have used what we've spent, and what we're doing is kind of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I mean, by all means, give us a call if you're working on something like that.
We're part of the Lake County Healthy Forest. I can't remember. I said on calls, we just supplied them with a bunch of data.
Yeah, that they can use.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
I can't
demonstrate.
remember the name of that.
Forest Health Council.
Forest Healthcare Council. Thank you. Yes. So we participate in that. This is a quick graphic kind of showing what we've decided, what our vegetation management standard is. The black right there, that replicates or represents a power line. Everything between the turquoise colored lines would be removed. So essentially, if you took the center line of a pole, measured it out either way, ideally, 15 to 20 feet is what we'd like on either side of the pole. We do tweak that a little bit. This is representing a 3-phase line, so you've got a cross arm which extends out 8 to 10 feet or 5 foot on either side. If that was what we call a single phase line, we might not have to go quite that wide. But again, out in the rural parts of our community and service territory, that 15 to 20 is welcomed by most people. Sometimes we have to go outside those aqua colored lines if the tree is leaning towards the line. We will go beyond that. So here's a little bit of data so far. We have about 750 miles of overhead line. This is strictly pretty much overhead. You know, we estimated we had needed to come in and cut at some level about 250. And so we're just not quite halfway through yet. And there's the tree totals and then the trees that we've trimmed. We also try to take into account aesthetics of a tree when we trim them. Sometimes you have to give a buzz cut on one side, it may be right there. And we may have a conversation with the owner and say, we can cut it or we can just take it down. What would you prefer? And many times they just say, take the tree down. Sometimes they say, you know, give it a shave on the one side and let it grow out to the other. So, and sometimes that kind of helps keeping it away and leans away from our line. So here's a couple examples that I'm very proud of. You know, the one on the left is a before and the one on the right is the after. You know, so one of the things that we're very proud of, or I'm very proud of the way our contractor works, is we keep the right of way very clean. We don't, if we have to take out trees, we generally stack the wood. They'll cut it in 2 to 3 foot lengths, stack it very on the edge of the right of way. If the homeowner or the landowner wants it, they'll come in and take it. You know, so we leave the right of way very neatly. We just don't leave the slash laying there. In certain places, here's one up in Lake County. You can see how the right of way looked and how it ended up. We will chip a lot right there in place, and so we just will chip it, but we don't leave the slash in any type of, you know, I would say a burnable state. Again, this is actually down to Fremont County. Again, you can see how thick the trees had gotten. And again, you can see how nice and neat everything is. Like I said, we chip it. Small brush like that sagebrush, a couple pictures back, we don't take those out. But if we had some up in Lake County, there are some like an elm type that grows really thick, and it's just past Twin Lakes. We do go in and remove all of that. Again, a picture down in Chaffee County, befores and afters. So this is one of my favorite pictures. This is in VV. You can't really, if you can look in there, you can see 3 wires between the V of that tree. And that is just very poor. You know, it would have been it's a tough decision to have to take a tree out like that. Right. But you're not doing that tree any favors cutting it like that. At some point, that tree is just going to get unhealthier and healthier. And then ultimately it could fall on the house, it could do certain things. But we are seeing very, very positive results in both, you know, downline, and our reliability numbers have just really, really improved, so. You have this presentation, please feel free to contact anybody on this list. I left my business cards here, please feel free to call me, my cell number's on there, call me anytime you want. You just want some information, or just better yet, when Jeff was in this position, a couple times he asked me, Excel tells us this, is that true? So if Excel's telling you something and you need another opinion, sorry. If you want an opinion, I'm happy to give it to you. Or if I don't know it, I'm happy to get somebody on my staff to do it. I appreciate your time, greatly appreciate meeting you. And if you have anything, remember the scholarships, you know, any other charitable giving, or if you think something might be eligible, please contact Chris. I really like being out in the community. I like our company out in the community, and so we're striving for that.
I think you guys have all kinds of programs, grants and stuff like that. Can you tell me a little bit more about, how much Lake County participates in the Rural Economic Development Loan and Grant Program?
That I cannot.
Okay,
I don't-
fair enough.
I mean, I wish I did. Chris might.
I would say not a lot. The red leg, is that what you're looking at on there, rural, I think that's the alphabet soup, I think is red leg, yeah. It's available.
It's available. I don't, I, quite frankly, I don't think,
Or
very
Chafee,
much,
or
very many people participate,
Yeah.
but we welcome, trying to help.
Same parameters, like it would need to be in like a zone that is serviced by,
By
DC,
Sangre,
right?
I'll be honest with you, that's one of those I don't know that much
We
about.
have someone on staff who's far more familiar
Okay.
than either of us, but I feel like that's a federal,
That's
program
part of, I just had this conversation with somebody about a red light grant. I can't remember, but
but we can, if
It
you're
looks like it's through the USDA, but I
It
just
is.
didn't know if you guys were like a good like booster for that, or it's just a good link.
so,
Give you Mike Allen's,
Mike, Sarah certainly would know probably,
And Sarah,
CFO.
I think Mike worked on the last
Yeah.
one we did.
So the reason, a little trivia for you, the co-op world, we borrow money from the RUS, because we were established as part of the USDA,
What's our US?
Rural Utility Services, which is a division of USDA,
Okay.
which was part of the Roosevelt administration when the when the co-ops were built.
Mhm.
And the goal was to take and get electricity to all the rural farmers out there. So they put it under the Department of Agriculture to give
Okay.
all the farmers power,
Makes
because
sense.
back in the thirties, you got a farm, it's not gonna be economical to extend a line 20 miles to some farmer for anybody. So the USDA, that was part of FDR's administration to create the REA, the Rural Electrification Association. It's quite a history there. It's quite interesting. So that's how we borrow money from, that ultimately comes from USDA. We can get loans from them. We also borrow money from private entities, but we can borrow money from Rural Utility Services. Again, any questions, if you ever, would like to talk, sure,
Three, you want them all right?
please. And if we got time, I don't wanna,
First question, I'll just get them all out there, your source of electricity, the breakout, and maybe talk a little bit about how you feel about the renewables.
sure.
And then, I guess that's the first and the second part of that question. The third question is just curiosity. Those poles that are on the ground on the farm on the right-hand side, they've been laying there for a couple of years now?
Going just north of BV.
Yes.
Those, that's easy one. Those belong, so there's a 115 kV line that comes out of Malta Sub that ends up down at Poncha Springs. And the line kind of follows almost the highway, you can see most of it. That belongs to XL, that is an XL transmission line. We're kind of unique. Our power, actually, we interconnect with the XL stations, but our power comes from Tri-State. They are our power provider, so they wheel the power across the XL system. Those poles are going to replace the two pole structures, what's called an H structure there, are going to go there, I don't know how far north, how far south, those are gonna be replacement. The reason they've been sitting there for so long is because XL had to go before the Chaffee County zoning, I think, or is something, because the pole, they're going from two poles to a single pole, which meant they're gonna go taller. And so it is part of the siding and part of the rules of Chaffee County, they had to get a variance. Well, you'd think, people up there in that northern part were just screaming. They're saying it's gonna change their view, and I'm thinking, you won't even know. Going from two poles and a cross arm to a single pole with small insulators. I've been in the business a long time, I'm partial, so that's what those are gonna replace there, but it's been put on hold until At least that's what it was about a year ago. They had to get a variance from Chaffey County. Going to your power supply, we get 95% of our power from Tri-State. Tri-State is a co-op themselves, 42 members, they have 42 members. Probably 2/3 of the co-ops in Colorado belong to Tri-State. There's a handful that aren't. They get their power from Excel or from other means. And so, currently, at any given time, our power is about 40% renewable right now. And so, Chris is gonna have to tell me, so we're about 20, and that's come buying from Tri-State. We have a little small solar right there south of the prison in BV. We get a little bit of solar from that. We don't own it, but we take the power from it. By 2030, Tri-State will be 83% renewable, which is far ahead of schedule from what the state standards had set. I don't recall what those are, but they will be ahead of schedule. But they'll be 83% renewable by 2030. They just commissioned a couple large solar plants down towards New Mexico. They just are operating, they're getting a bunch of wind from eastern Colorado. So yeah, they're decommissioning, they'll be decommissioning their coal here over the next, I think the last coal plant, one in Craig and one in Springerville, Arizona, will essentially be shut down in 2031. They also were the recipient of some large grant money that was put out in the Biden administration. Biden administration made available about $9.7 billion and they were focused to the co-ops. There's over 800 co-ops in the United States to try to transition to a renewable source. Tri-State received $670 million to help make that transition. As we all know, a lot of that money has been held up in the new administration. So they're back in Washington. Matter of fact, they were there yesterday lobbying to try to get some of that money released. So.
Is there still a coal plant in Oklahoma?
Yes.
Right.
I believe so.
Are they gonna decommission that and turn it into nuclear or something?
That's been talked about. There is, that certainly, there is one of my peers, my CEO in a co-op over in Pueblo West and that called San Isabel. He's really educated himself on nuke stuff, and so we were at a meeting and they presented a bunch of stuff on nukes, these small modular nukes. It was fascinating. One of them is kind of truck mounted, and essentially you bring it in, use it for 10 years, and you take it away. You don't refuel it or anything. It's, none of them. It's all still very in development. But yeah, it was quite interesting. So yeah, there's that talk. So yeah.
It's the ultimate green energy, isn't it? Except for the waste.
And
You gotta keep that waste cool.
well,
But
and
there's not much of it.
there's not.
Ultimately, there's not.
So again, I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much time, but I like talking about it.
We ask a lot of questions, we're total neophytes.
We're notorious for going over our allotted times.
So, you know, I was working in California for the Department of Energy when they decided to shut down Diablo Canyon power plant. You know, Diablo Canyon was just an awful thing if you listen to, everything about the nuclear plant. And so I watched how, everything that they had to go through to decommission, because it had a 30-year license and PG&E did not want to go through the relicensing of that plant. That was 2015. Now they're keeping it open and they're going, let's keep this thing open. It's amazing how in 10 years or in less than 10 years that transitioned to something that may be a good thing. So just a little how fast things change, so.
The crystal ball is murky.
Exactly.
Well, we have wasn't 2012 when Fukushima nuclear power. I feel like there are these international crises
Fu-
around nuclear
Fukushima.
power.
Fukushima were the tidal wave, yeah.
And then we're like, no more nuclear. And then, give us enough time and we're like, you know what, we should consider nuclear energy. And then there's another international thing, it's like, okay, no.
They're exploring opening 3 Mile Island again.
Yeah.
Supposedly Google bought it, I don't know if that was fact, but I've heard something, yeah.
That's one of the things is all the power they need for AI.
Mhm.
Those companies are gonna start building nuclear power plants just to power all that AI.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's certainly on, again, you go to, I was just at a meeting of co-op CEOs and the big AI power, whatever, data centers was on everybody's mind.
They're gonna suck up
And it's
more than half of the power.
it's amazing on how much,
Oh my gosh.
and then the other part is, from a co-op, we couldn't even service any of that stuff.
Right.
And then, so then you go into, okay, well, do you charge, you got some some company that's gonna pay you millions of dollars a month, do you charge them to put the infrastructure in? Well, there's a debate, yeah, well, you'll get it back, or you at least make them put up some money, cause they might go belly up here, really quick. I've seen that happen in other industries, so.
How well prepared are we regionally for the electrification of every single little, everyone's got, from rechargeable bicycles to the growing use of cars and, drones and every device on the planet now, you're just plugging into a wall to get it working for.
You certainly we're becoming much more vulnerable with shutting down base load fossil fuels. I know people, coal is a bad thing in many ways, or natural gas even, but it does provide a certain baseline, and stability. Matter of fact, I just watched a documentary on Superstorm Uri, about, I'm getting sidetracked here, but it was very interesting that when Texas did the blackout thing in 2021, very interesting, if you can find a YouTube on that. But certainly, a lot of people have put a lot of faith in the development of batteries. But, batteries, you can only get so much power out of the battery, and then you drain the battery. So for long sustained outage, but batteries are certainly have come around. I worked at a company a couple years ago, we put in batteries and they've definitely they're evolving constantly, and then there's some new technologies I can't even call it. Iron air, I don't even know how it works, but that's, supposedly coming. But yeah, by transferring over to the renewables, there is a certain amount of vulnerability that we may see. And then trying to power a bunch of new load, that could be even more difficult. So there's a lot of oversight by a couple organizations. NERC, North American Reliability Corporation, they have standards that you're supposed to, a lot of companies, you have to abide by, but then there's others that don't have to abide by. So there's, again, your risk is greater. So, and I can go into much more detail, but
I'll save the conversation
yeah.
about tokamak
So,
reactors and
but
stuff
no,
for
there
another
is-
day.
there is some reports, and actually it's not necessarily here, but in a place you wouldn't think. They put out Western Energy Coordinating Council put out a report, and they show the vulnerability kind of in the Midwest, kind of from Missouri up, which was kind of interesting. I can't remember exactly, they say why, but yeah, there's some vulnerability there, and so yeah, it's certainly.
Last question from me, I promise.
Yeah.
Unless no, I'm kidding.
No,
Now, speaking of vulnerability, how about terrorist attacks and equipment taking, I've heard 10 years to get equipment from China? Is a lot of your equipment comes from China? Solar flares, I mean, do we work with the Office of Emergency Management if we lose power in a significant way?
So probably the greater risk, again, I worked for DOE for quite a number of years, and part of my responsibility was the physical, making sure we had hardened substations. I'm trying to say this how short I can say this. So as a as a co-op like us, we don't fall under certain standards because all we are is a distribution co-op. We do not have transmission high voltage lines, and we do not generate. So we don't have to fall under these certain standards. But if you're a transmission provider and a generator, you have to provide certain standards, both physical, you have to do assessment on all your substations, switch yards, and then you have to rank them. There's criteria for ranking them. You got low, medium, high, and super high. And that super high is one where what we call the black hole. If all of a sudden that thing blows up in a black hole, what happens? And they simulate that. Okay, you've got this model, you shut that down. Does the grid go dark? And so they do those models, and then from that, if that happens, then you have to put in certain physical barriers to try to not allow the physical piece, a bomb, gunfire or something like that. So you do that, or somebody may want to drive a tank through your fence. So there's the physical side. The greater threat is probably the cybersecurity side. Trying to get into your system. And the standards that they have for what they call SIP, it's called Critical Infrastructure Protection, is unbelievable. That these transmission providers like Excel, Black Hills, or Tri-State, they all have to have these standards, and then you get audited every 3 years on both physical and cyber. So it's always, cyber is gonna always be out there. It's unbelievable, but there are some very strong safeguards that are in there. But they're costly, they're very timely. So a friend of mine I worked with it in the transmission company many years ago, when I was at DOE. He said, we used to be an energy provider, transmission provider that also did a little bit of security. Now we're a security company that also dabbles in transmission. So, in compliance. A lot of the companies have just turned into they do compliance all the time. Testing, reporting, all this stuff, so. I said a mouthful there, so sorry.
Most of our stuff comes from China, most of our relay switches and.
No. Probably the only thing that we're really beholden to China on is what they call core steel or grain steel, which is what transformer cores are made of. But most everything else we can source domestically, or at least in, I would say, friendlier countries. Core steel is one of the challenges. I just was in a meeting, they talked about how much of that comes from China, but a lot of it does. But the relays, everything, best relay company in the world is headquartered in Redmond, Washington, called SELs. They're great, and they're made pretty much mostly. Now, the components, I can't really speak about, but they're very good. But there are, China, they try to get in the business. They certainly are trying.
Alright, I'll stop now.
No.
I like this stuff too, this stuff.
I'm happy,
Electrifying.
if you ever want, I'm happy to talk.
Yeah.
Like I said, I can tell you more about our energy provider, Tri-State, because Tri-State's a very good company, and they are certainly headed, I believe, in a good direction. Reliability is ultimate, but they also wanna, they're trying to be, bring on the more renewables. Yeah. Like I said, call me, I'd be happy to come up and meet with you sometime. I enjoyed having conversations with Jeff Fiedler, because he was very interested.
Is he still on the board?
No, he had to step down with his new position. That was contingent upon his taking the new job. That was, because
So you're looking for somebody else?
He's working for the PUC, Public
No, I mean,
Utility.
you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yes, we do have an open seat, yep. So, matter of fact, that just closed, we advertised it for about 3 weeks and just closed, and the board will make that selection here in the near future, so.
Yeah.
Hope I didn't take
No,
too long. Alright.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you
very much,
Yeah,
nice
thank
meeting
you so much,
everybody.
Gary.
Thank you. Good luck in your new.
Thank you.
Yes, best of luck.
Appreciate that.
We're old hands now, we've been here 6 weeks.
Okay, gosh, that's
Season's pros.
a lot soon.
Need signatures on that, that's the
Okay.
land use thing that you
Got it.
got outvoted on.
2 to 1. I ended up getting it anyway, I think, but it was just a delay, accidentally. You know,
Thanks everybody again.
Take care.
yeah, thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Gary, and Chris, thank you.
I'm so, I can't go back to
And
it.
this is the IGA between Lake County and Chaffey County for
For the,
detention training. If you
Yeah, they're on,
remember to sign more.
they're on
Oh,
there.
not that one. Okay, down here.
I'm pretty
Oh, boy.
determined to get that wall down.
2025, or should
Yeah.
I write it out?
Yeah, you can just put it.
That one?
Yeah.
This one or that one?
That one.
There.
To a window.
Oh, to a window,
We're gonna get it. There's
Beautiful.
political will.
So much.
Sledgehammer,
Well, let's do it.
save taxpayers some money.
Team building activity,
Yeah,
right?
it'll be like the stress relief session.
That would be awesome.
Just knock a big old window right there.
Does this need sheriff's signature before? Right, okay, so, I will probably have to wait till tomorrow to get that from him, is that okay? I don't know, I've gotta go pick up my kid, I could come back and look.
No, that's already.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Alright, Adam, what is up with the memorandum of understanding between Lake County Tourism Panel and Lake County Early Care Education Fund?
I'll give some background on this, and then I'd love to just open it up to a conversation with Chris about, potentially a different vehicle for this, sort of thing, so. For those of you who are not aware, and our commissioners, there is, something called, there is a bill that was passed in the House in 2021 called HB 1117. And HB 1117 was a House bill that allowed communities to potentially divert funding away from the responsibility of the tourism office to help promote and precipitate and bring about, future tourism and future folks' interest in your community. And so HB 1117, when it was passed, there are a few communities who have leveraged it, and you can actually divert up to 90% of my funding away from my department. Obviously, not the most exciting prospect for someone like myself, and the communities where this effort has taken place, I think that the proof is in the pudding in terms of if you're talking about a place like Boulder County or Denver County, Denver, where you can actually, you're talking about $3 million in terms of lodging tax revenue. If you divert 20%, 30%, you can actually make an appreciable difference on, let's say, childcare or housing or things like that. But in a community like ours, where my total revenue for 2024 is $275,000, it's in many cases, especially in rural communities, it is shown to be stealing from Peter to pay Paul, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the amount of money that we're actually talking about is not very significant. So regardless, throughout the 3 years that I've been doing the job that I've been doing, there have been two let's just call them, credible conversations around trying to leverage HB 1117 to do exactly what we're talking about. Basically, there are community organizations and nonprofits and people who are aware of this HB 1117, so much so that they actually hold conferences to talk about how nonprofits can work with community leaders and maybe get the ear of a county commissioner to try and stand up something that would go to the voting public within the county to leverage HB 1117. So luckily, the first conversation we were able to work through, and in part, what has made the conversation easier within the nonprofit community is the fact that the tourism panel for the last 3 years has stood up the community support program. So the community support program was a vehicle whereby the tourism panel took 10% of its projected revenue, and we offered a small grant program to community organizations and nonprofits and people who wanted to do small projects that would have a net positive impact on tourism for our community. So that looked like things like supporting ski joring or the Sobo Trail Days, that, a thru hiker trail event. We've done things for getting Wi-Fi down at the old at the schoolhouse down in Twin Lakes. You name it, we have sort of like been a part. The first year we awarded 14 applications, then the next year was 11. And part of the reason why the number has shrank is because our revenue has shrank based on the factors like the Silver King closing and short-term rental regulations and things like that. So last year, there was a conversation around some nonprofit folks who were interested in going to one of these events and learning about how they could be super creative on leveraging HB 1117. And we were able to have some dialogue with those nonprofits. I was able to have some communication with some community leaders around, hey, rather than going this drastic route of bringing something to the vote of the people where we are literally changing our lodging tax, changing the way that our lodging tax is being distributed, why don't we actually come up with a solution that could work to not steal from Peter to pay Paul, but actually be mutually beneficial. Obviously, we all understand that childcare needs are pretty critical in our community, and that there isn't a lot of guaranteed funding out there. So the Early Childcare Fund, we started conversations with them and went through the tourism panel and went through some conversations and went through iterations of what would make sense, what could we actually do in order to set aside some dedicated funding for early childcare, but not impede the work that the tourism panel is trying to do. So we came up with basically a vehicle, whether it's an MOU or whatever is gonna actually work from a legal standpoint, that's to be determined, but basically 5% of our actualized revenue, so rather than projecting revenue, just at the end of the year, what do we actually make? And then taking 5% of that and dedicating it to the Early Childcare Fund. Now, if by some miracle, we get commercial lodging built in this community, we most likely would see revenues exceed $350,000. So what we were talking about is, if we were actually able to get back up to that $350,000 threshold, that we would dedicate 10% of our actualized revenue. So, in this case, let's just use 2024, 5% of 275,000. I mean, again, not a huge amount of money that we're talking about, but if we were able to get 390,000 and we could cut a check to the Early Childcare Fund for $39,000, $100,000, that would be wonderful. That would be a win-win and would not jeopardize our operations, especially given the fact that we've made so many cuts to, the professional service agreements we had, software we were using, we're doing a lot more stuff in-house, things like that. So, we've really skivvied up our organization, but also this feels much more in keeping with what the nonprofit community has been asking for. Because again, the community support program was the vehicle that we came up with, but we always have this sort of pending Damocles over our head where, we hear like the HB 1117 conversation goes away and then new staff members come on board at a nonprofit and all of a sudden they want to explore it again. So we were talking about, creating this dedicated fund as a way, and I'm just being really transparent around where I'm sitting with this, is like, this feels like a really good vehicle to have an awesome impact on our community that very much aligns with the community's needs, aligns with what HB 1117 set out to do, and if we can do it as pick a vehicle that works for us, works for the county, MOU, IGA, TLC, I just made that up, like come up with something that actually works and it could be reviewed year after year, that feels like a more sustainable vehicle.
So the goal is taking the uncertainty off the table.
Yep.
Regarding this, but if it is up for review year after year, wouldn't that still put you kind of in the position of not knowing what's going up next?
Potentially, but again, I think that what this is a good faith effort where we're actually having the conversation with the early childcare fund of like, why don't you work directly with the tourism panel to come up with a solution that actually benefits us both, rather than trying to go around us and go to a vote of the people to potentially take away 60, 70, 80% of our funding. Essentially
Up to 90%, that's wild.
essentially eliminating, in many communities, they've lost DMO, or we're called a destination marketing organization, they just don't have one anymore, because you can't do the work if don't have any funding, so. So again, I think, I just mentioned the every year thing because I imagine that is probably one of Chris's points, and I'm not certain, Chris and I haven't talked about this directly, but Chris wanted to have this be a work session and have this be a conversation about what vehicle makes the most sense in order to create some sort of agreement between the ECE, Early Child Care Fund, and the tourism panel.
Can I ask you a question? So when the original lodging tax was passed, did it say it was for childcare and, no?
It wasn't allowed until HB 117.
Yes.
You
To
could
use it for
only
something
spend it
else.
on marketing. What HB 117 did was allowed counties to go back to the voters and say, hey, of all that money that you're collecting for lodging taxes, you can now spend up to 90% of that on childcare or housing. So none of that was ever on the table until just 3 years ago.
I think my question is, are we allowed to spend lodging tax dollars on childcare if the voters did not approve us to do so?
Yeah, so
Oh,
the
great question.
reason why we are allowed to do that is because of the passing of 2A. So within the city of Leadville, when they created an accommodations tax, the accommodations tax where 1.92% of that money flows back. So for 2024, that's like 100, I could tell you exactly, but $100,000+ is unrestricted. It goes to the tourism panel to be spent as we see fit. That's the reason why we were allowed to create the community support program to begin with. Because again, when 2A was passed, you have to imagine when 2A was passed, it was passed very much with this same feeling of tourism is not doing enough for the community. So, yeah, I don't have the exact number here, but it's $120,000 of our budget can be spent because it's accommodations tax funds that flows to the tourism panel through the city of Leadville.
Cities,
Mhm.
Good question.
Can I offer, this conversation, I like the idea of it being renewed every year because what's currently in the state legislation is an opportunity for us to go back to the voters and say, hey, do you wanna increase lodging taxes up to 6%? And then really open up what those dollars could be spent on. So it could be that like in the short term, we're spending 5% in this good faith effort, but you know, it's also very likely that we'll have the potential for this to, for far more than the 5% from our 1.92.
Yeah.
To go to childcare.
Yeah, and as a point of reference, I mentioned this to Lauren, that if our lodging tax was to increase today, or let's just say at the end of 2024, if it was to increase to 6%, that would net us an additional $156,000. So again, we're not talking about, even if we increase the lodging tax from 2% to 6% in our community based on our occupancy rates, because we only really have short-term rentals and call it 290 commercial beds, none of which are flagged. We don't actually net that much money.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the pot increases.
Yeah.
As opposed to, and that increase can go.
Yep.
As opposed to what HB 117 was doing, was saying, hey, you can't increase the pot, but you can change what you spend it on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in HB 1117, the wording was that the money that you were, whatever percentage you were diverting had to go directly to childcare and workforce housing for people in the hospitality and tourism industry, but there is zero oversight in every community that has leveraged HB 1117. They just, that money has gone directly into the general fund and has not been set aside for childcare and housing, because there is no oversight there. So it's a you know, it is dangerous, the threat of things like HB 1117, because again, we don't necessarily have the systems in place to be able to make sure that that money is going directly towards workforce housing and it literally flows into the general fund.
But your proposal or your preference is into childcare and not into housing?
Oh, it's just that these are the conversations we've been having, you know, and again, I think that 2A created the accommodations tax, which the 3% of that 5% that's collected, so you know, there's 5% tax collected on anyone that stays in a room in Leadville. 3% goes towards housing, 1.9% goes back to the tourism panel. So for us, I'm already out here tap dancing every day to get people to come to Leadville, and anyone who stays in Leadville, I'm already contributing to housing at a 3% tax. So I feel like I'm already doing my job there. So at this point, the other one that hasn't been sort of given any love, so to speak, is the early child care fund.
So that 3% that goes into housing, is that like a separate account, or where is that? How much is in there?
It's not a separate account. Right now, the city and the county have an IGA where there's a certain amount that goes to the regional housing authority. And what I and Adam have been working on for 3 years now is trying to make sure that the county has the city has accountability with their collection of 2A, because it has not been pretty. I do think that we're moving in the right direction, but Adam and I have been the oversight of this new tax not going directly into the general fund.
Yeah, and the other thing to mention is that, you know, that 3% tax in the city that goes to the RHA, that's, you know, if we got 120,000, you know, they're gonna get 200,000, whereas what we're talking about here for the early child care fund, you know,
That's like $7,000.
is like, yeah, $7,000 to $10,000, and that amount of money ain't gonna do diddly squat for housing, but actually will have an impact on childcare, given the fact that the asks that the early child care fund have made to funders is much smaller than anything having to do with housing. So, again, the lack of dedicated funding around early child care feels like a need where we can safely be able to dedicate actualized revenue towards that.
gosh, it's really complicated. How much is in that housing fund right now? What should we,
It's not a specific fund,
at account?
it's not a specific fund or account, there's the housing authority's budget, not all of it comes from the city. The city did contribute another $300,000 because the 2A money isn't gonna do diddly squat when it comes to housing. So you need more money than what we're producing with taxes. And I don't know, from my standpoint, it seems like the RHA is spending it, using that money to leverage more money, outside money. They're saying, look, we have this much, we have this relationship and cooperation, multi-governmental, and that helps us leverage more money.
And yeah, in terms of collections, the thing that I'm working with the city on right now, and leveraging a lot of my state partners, cause there's about 34 or so communities around the state who have entered into direct, it's called voluntary collections agreements. So basically at point of sale, the taxes will be collected, because what makes an accommodations tax really difficult is that when you say, we are no longer using the county's lodging tax, because within the city of Leadville, whenever anyone stayed in a room, it used, like stayed in a hotel type thing, that money was collected directly at point of sale. Flowed directly to the Department of Revenue, and then that money flowed directly from the Department of Revenue to Lake County government, no matter where they stayed, in the city or the county. It was a direct flow every month. When you create an accommodations tax, you no longer collect the lodging tax. That's the reason why it becomes unrestricted funds, because you're saying, okay, we're not collecting that lodging tax anymore, we have our own accommodations tax, but it's up to the municipality, it's up to the city to enforce and come up with a system of collections themselves. And the city, at the time, chose to say, we do not wanna have a voluntary collection system, we do not wanna collect at that point of sale, we do not wanna enter into an agreement with Airbnb and VRBO and all of the big providers, because we want to actually have people remit the taxes directly to us, so that we know exactly who the license holders are and exactly how much tax we're collecting. And unfortunately, because they do not have someone on staff who has it in their job description to do that work, it's been kind of a hot potato since 2021 in terms of being like, I don't know, you deal with that, I don't know, you deal with that. And there was kind of a hope, a thought that MuniRevs, which is the company that they have a contract with to help administer the program, that it would be kind of a white glove service. But as I always say, if you have Adobe Photoshop, that doesn't mean you have beautifully edited photographs. That means you have a piece of software that can do things. So there is not currently the staff capacity or institutional knowledge within the city of Leadville to administer that program in a judicious way that would net anything close to 100% collections. So that's why I've now re-entered, again, when it was set up in 21, there was no appetite for direct collections, but now here we sit in 2025 and they're ready to enter into those agreements with Airbnb and VRBO. So I've just now connected the deputy city clerk with the appropriate people at Airbnb and VRBO in order to set up those direct collection programs. Because at this point, they now know how many licenses they have a sense of how much money they should be collecting. So why not take the guesswork out of it and have it be collected right at point of sale so that we don't have to guess.
Yeah, just take the money.
Cause I have talked to second homeowners specifically who have had some, suggestions for me on how we could do better in terms of tourism here, who have told me flat out that they do not pay their taxes. They own and short-term rent in the city of Leadville, and they're like, the city doesn't know how to collect it properly, so until they have the system figured out, I'm just not paying my taxes. It's voluntary, they can.
Voluntary taxes, I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
There's compliance mechanisms.
Yeah, there's compliance mechanisms.
There are compliance mechanisms, but just like Adam said, there's nobody there who's doing this full time. They don't have anywhere near the bandwidth to actually use those compliance mechanisms.
And
So they're just leaving money on the table.
Oh, we're,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're well aware of the fact that the tourism panel is owed over $100 to $110,000 in back taxes that we haven't paid. And unfortunately, there's an expiration date each month,
Each month, we lose out on getting those taxes recollected.
because we know in 2022, $70,000 was not collected. But when we go into March of '25, we lose out on March of '22 and
We have
April
a three,
and
yeah,
May.
there's a 3-year.
Floating calendar year to collect.
Floating calendar year, and both Elsa and I have made this very apparent to the city, but what are we gonna do? Go rob their safe? So,
Yes. I just wanna say, the whole point of this, one of the reasons why I loved 2A is that it connected the work of the tourism panel, so seeing a direct correlation between bringing people here, heads and beds, and benefiting the community. So people are like, I hate tourists suck. This was a way to like connect tourists being here to directly impacting in a positive way our residents. And if the tourism panel's funding is reduced by using HB 1117, then we just have that fewer resources to get more heads and beds. And so it kind of becomes a downward spiral. So even though, say Adam can bring in $300,000 right now, just say, I know it's not clear. And then we enact HB 1117 and they take 50%. We've got, all that money came in, but now Adam's budget to get heads and beds is only here. And so we're potentially bringing in, we have like less and less, the concern, this is not a for certain, but the concern is that when you have less money in marketing, you can bring fewer people into the community, which reduces the amount of taxes you're collecting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've been curious and trying to work with our community to understand like, hey, we understand your need, thank you so much for working on it. And can you watch what other counties are doing to see like, if you take 10%, how much does that reduce your purchasing power? If you take 15%, how much does that reduce your purchasing power? If you take 90%, how much does that reduce your purchasing power? And so, I don't wanna like throw nonprofits under the bus, cause they're working on something incredibly important, and we want both of our efforts to not be diminished. So this is an opportunity to say, hey, can we tie our successes to your success? So if we bring in more money, then you get a bigger piece of the pie. But until then, please let us continue to grow this, because we're clearly at this like weird knife edge where we're not increasing the amount of people coming in, and we're trying to keep our pot steady. It's like a tenuous time. Yeah. So this offers a wonderful opportunity for us to say, yes, we want our success to be directly tied to yours, and please don't undermine all of our success by reducing our purchasing power to get heads and beds.
Makes sense.
and I will offer that the community support program, which was the tourism panel's kind of solution, and that 10% that we were sort of allocating based on how we were projecting revenues. I'll just be blunt, even though Elsa was one of the creators here, is like the nonprofit community didn't, they weren't,
What is this?
they weren't happy about it in terms of, it didn't make them go,
I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
Don't apologize.
They didn't go like, oh great.
is in here and run.
Yeah. I don't belong here, okay. I gotta go say hello.
What do you do on powder days?
You need a snorkel? Give them snacks.
Buddy, please.
No snacks, buddy.
Not today.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I know, there we go. Oh, yeah, there we go, this way, sorry.
That's fine.
Oh, now the EMP.
But yeah, the point is like, it didn't remove the threat of HB 1117. The way that we were thinking it would, whereas this is a direct ask from the nonprofit community. So it does actually sort of meet the expectations of the people who have the relationship with tourism that we might call mixed.
So let me see if I understand this. You're suggesting that we go this route because there's a possibility that the nonprofits could go to the voters and say, there's enough tourists, we'd like to be able to take 90%. Is that right?
I mean, that's one way to think about it, yeah. It also, at the end of the day, is
It
like,
doesn't feel good, pause, it does not feel good for me to hear this like us versus them, county versus nonprofits. We are all trying to work on getting more money into childcare, right? We are all trying to get more heads in beds. So yes, the nonprofits are working on childcare, but that doesn't mean that it's like the nonprofits want this and it's a threat to us.
If it sounded like that, and you know, that.
No, I've heard it multiple times from Adam
Yeah,
too.
yeah, totally, and
Adam
again,
knows.
and again, I know for me, where I come at it, and Elsa's well aware, is like, I get people calling me saying, hey, we're looking into this thing, you know, and at the end of the day, I am thinking about myself, thinking about Katie who I hire, I'm thinking about the visitor center, I'm thinking about the ambassadors that we hire at the visitor center.
Right.
I'm thinking about the big picture of my department. It's not like I'm going to advocates and going like, hey, I found a bill where I can take all your money away and put it towards tourism. So I obviously, unfortunately, have a emotional response to this concept. But at the end of the day, like, no, I have small kids, we need childcare, we do not have enough money towards childcare, period,
Right.
so.
I guess what you're saying is that there could be mutual, the successes can be tied together.
100%, definitely, and again, especially, you know, it's like, if we have partners at the table in the nonprofit community, if we build something like this, yeah, we have another partner at in the community who's also saying, yeah, a hotel in this community makes a lot of sense, cause then we can actually raise our revenue above $300,000, you know?
Yeah.
So, it is, for me, in my department, and the way I think about all this, it is a win-win, it is a best case scenario, especially because when the nonprofit and tourism are talking about a solution together, that's way better than the alternative, you know?
And anyone in the community could pull the HB 1117 lever, so it's not just nonprofits.
Or we have to go to the vote, right? Or not,
Yeah, I'm just saying they could get it to a vote. We
get
could,
it on the
we
ballot.
could get it on
Anyone
the ballot.
could petition
Yeah.
and let it on the.
Yeah, we are a potential threat to Adam's budget as well.
It's true.
It probably has a decent chance of passing, given the
Yeah,
animosity towards tourism and
yeah.
And me
and people
personally,
not really knowing, people not really knowing how it all works.
Right,
Cause the verbiage on the ballot is always inadequate, and depending on what it says, it's always kind of vague. It's not like the whole bill is on there to read.
The word stuff to make it sound one way or another, you know, really,
Well,
that's
yeah,
a whole art unto itself is how that's, the
two-way,
verbiage is used,
two-way pass with flying colors.
you know.
You know, cause the way it was written is like, do you want visitors to pay for, you know, the future of a house that you might have in this community, basically.
And what was the
Well,
one
and-
about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I also just wanna say, like, it costs a lot of money to run a campaign, so getting 2A on the ballot was expensive, run by the Housing Coalition. And if somebody wants to run a campaign with a ballot initiative, it will be far more than 5% of our budget. It will cost them far more than 5% of the tourism panel's budget to get it on the ballot. So they would wanna go for more than this deal that Adam has.
But what you're saying is without any kind of tourism budget or a big hit to the tourism budget, potentially we're gonna see enough of a hit in tourism in general that it's gonna affect the bottom line of the people who would benefit from taking out of that budget anyway, so it's,
It's gonna affect
Now,
all of us.
I understand that angle. Playing devil's advocate, if someone were to argue against this, what do you think they would say?
You mean this particular proposal?
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And again, I think that really comes down to like, you know, the conversations that I had with these folks in real life and them, like, we sat down and looked at my budget. And they were like, my God.
Yeah.
Especially given the fact that we, 2 years ago, I was dealing with $400,000, now I'm dealing with $275,000, it's like, you've been taking a lot of hits.
Yeah,
And again, I'll just speak for myself, like, with this closure of the Silver King, with the short-term rental regulations, like, yeah, my budget has been beaten up a lot.
well, I guess the concern is that someone's gonna see how well this works in a larger, more well-funded community and not realize that the success of these two sides could be tied together here because of the small beans we get to pick from.
Well, one of the unfortunate consequences of HB 1117 is that if our regional partners enact this and they start losing market share, because we get so much like regional tourism, if Chaffey County goes down to 10%, then the fewer people coming to them, also the fewer people coming to us. The fewer people going to Summit, also the fewer people coming to us. So, like we're an ecosystem, and if you weaken a couple of the ponds in the area, then the whole system can also get unhealthy.
Damages the symbiosis.
Yeah, we saw this, OEDIT, which is Colorado's, don't tell me, Office of Economy and International Development. Economic Development. Oh,
You've been
anyway,
eating your alphabet soup.
OEDIT, Office of Economic Development and International Tourism Department.
Trade.
Got it.
International trade.
Dang it.
Close.
Anyway, that's the Colorado's like tourism panel. And in, was it 2011, 2010, 2011,
Yeah.
they reduced their budget by, they pretty much like stopped marketing Colorado. They were like, too many people are coming here, you gotta turn off the pipe. And we lost, it took us 10 years to get back to the same level of tourism that we had been experiencing. So when you
That's
take,
hard data, we can find
Yeah,
those
you-
numbers.
when you take,
Wow.
we lost like $12 billion over 10 years. The state lost $12 billion.
What era was that?
It was in
2010
the
to-
2000s. I think it was in the aughts.
2008?
Yeah, something like that, but I'll just send it to you guys now.
Okay,
Anyway, the point is that when we have seen at a state level that when we stop spending money on tourism, we affect generations of a community. So we are trying to learn, I'd say that the tourism panel has been trying to learn from Colorado's experience, to do everything we can to not have that happen, which is why conversations around HB 1117 have been so important, where it's not like, oh, we're trying to save Adam's job, or oh, the tourism panel just wants to feel important, or oh, like tourism is the lifeblood of our community. It's like, no, this is a huge economic driver,
far-reaching consequences.
far-reaching
Yeah.
consequences. Which is one of the reasons why
I'm trying to save my job though too.
Yeah, you should, that's your job. But it's one of the reasons why the tax was put into statute to begin with, is to make sure that communities can't take their foot off the gas, they have to spend that money.
Keeping the restaurants open in town
Yeah.
is important to the welfare of the children of this community.
And it's important to Summit, and it's important to Chaffey, like us doing that job is important to everybody
Right,
too.
pretty intricate web.
Yeah. So this is also allowing some of the web to help our childcare.
And so what's the percentage you propose?
5%.
5%.
Yeah, and again, like, I give a lot of credit to the nonprofit partners that we've been talking with is like, we talked about 10%, we talked about 20%, but we looked at our budget and it was like, let's start with 5% until we can actually grow the pot, you know?
Who all's on board with you, with this?
The early childcare fund, at the end of the day, that's, you know, that's where the money goes, so that's really all that matters.
May I ask?
Carly Saylor.
Oh, sorry. Is this money managed by the Lake County Community Fund?
Mhm.
So can we talk about how funding has been spent historically? Cause I know kind of end of last year, they had a bunch of money left over that they were trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
So I just wanna make sure that we have a good handle on what's needed, how it's spent, and like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Carly and Stacy can both speak to that.
Yeah, I'm Stacy Petty. I'm the director of the Rocky Mountain Early Childhood Council. I'm going to plan to come do a presentation for you all sometime soon to talk about the council. But I also head up efforts for the Lake County Early Care and Education Fund. And funding we received last year was a combination of funds from the city, the county, and a grant from Freeport. That was fully expended. Every dollar was fully expended. Now, Lake County Community Fund may have had other grant funding that you're referring to that maybe was not fully spent, but as far as the Early Care and Education Fund, it was fully expended.
Great, thanks, Stacy.
Carly.
Yeah,
Carly,
thanks.
yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and provide some additional context. Adam may have spoken to several nonprofit partners, but I know that he is also referring to Build a Generation. I'm the executive director at Build a Generation, and we operate the Child Care Coalition, which is a community-led group of people who are both childcare providers and impacted by the lack of childcare in our community, as well as business owners. Stacy is on that coalition and has been a huge part of continuing its momentum. And so I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is that the framing that y'all are talking about right now in terms of like, we all succeed together is very much how I operate and believe. I won't be around forever. I won't be in this role forever. But I have been part of conversations, or I've heard conversations where the framing to Adam was, you know, threatening. And that was not coming from me, but I know that that has been conversations that have happened in the past. And so I understand why, you know, like where he's coming from with that. I want to commit to you all that like that is not a way that I want to operate as the leader of Build Generation. I really believe in tourism as an essential part of our community and that we all need to be in this together, right? So I loved what y'all were saying in terms of like supporting the community is the best way to support our kids, and tourism is obviously a huge part of the Leadville Lake County community. So I wanted to clarify that. Again, Adam may have spoken to other nonprofit partners, but because we're a big player in childcare, I know that that's kind of where we're at as an organization. And then in terms of the funding, Stacy has more data around how the money was spent last year. But when you think about if and whether any of this should go to childcare or housing, like Adam mentioned, the proportion of money that we're talking about is quite small, and we don't see any way that that would make a significant impact in the housing space. But in childcare, 5% of this budget can make a big difference. For example, we're writing a check to Bright Start Learning Center this week, and it is a $5,000 check, relatively small. That's going to allow them to open up a whole new classroom and serve 14 new families in just a few months. So in a community like ours, that's a big impact. And so even as you're looking at the small numbers and thinking like, where are these dollars best spent? I'm committed to supporting Adam's work. I'm committed to supporting tourism, and an amount like $5,000 does impact a lot of families in our community and makes a meaningful change, both for, you know, the safety and health of children, but also the resilience of our economy, right? Because everyone depends on someone who depends on childcare. So we're not just talking about quality, affordable care for kids, though that is really important to us. We're talking about people who want to participate in our economy, but don't have a safe place or an affordable place to bring their kids, and that leaves them out of the workforce sometimes.
Great, thanks Carly.
So, the vehicle, the way this came up in terms of the request for the work session is that Adam had submitted a request for an MOU, which is a formal agreement, it is a contract, between the Lake County Early Child Care and Education Fund and the Lake County Tourism Panel. The challenge is that the Lake County Early Care and Education Fund is not an entity. It is an advisory fund hosted under the Lake County Community Fund. It's my understanding that based on information, and thank you Carly for having information on your website about the fund, that essentially has representatives from different nonprofits as like the advisory board for that fund. So when Melissa, my deputy, drafted requested MOU and sent it to me, I was like, we can't have a non-entity as a party to a contract because they don't essentially have overall contracting authority,
Right.
if you will. So then the question became, well, will one of these other nonprofits step up to be the actual other entity to contract? It's my understanding that they prefer not to do that. So my question was, given that, can we approach this the way we did with the other allocations to funds, like to the Lake County Community Fund, with a specification, with the parameters that Adam and Elsa are saying we will do an allocation letter to the Lake County Community Fund for the, the Early Care and Education Fund, based on the net, whatever the percentage is that's over the amount that you realize. So I don't think we need a contract for that. I think y'all just need to decide if you want to pursue this, and if so, if you make that allocation or agree to it, then we can craft a letter to the community fund saying this has been approved for this. Adam, what is it, since this is saying it's with the tourism panel, then what is is it the tourism panel by and through the Lake County Board of County Commissioners would be doing it?
Yeah.
So that we do it that way. That would be my recommendation as the quick and easy way to handle this, to meet the objective, if y'all decide you do want to, if the BOCC decides you want to accept Adam's recommendation and these other folks' recommendation to do this.
So we can't, notice our hands are tied, we can't do anything binding because there's just too many entities who could put HB 1117 into effect. But this is more of just like, here's how we've always operated, here's why it makes sense.
It's more of an internal process for Lake County versus relying on having this agreement that kind of relies on that statutory vehicle, if you will.
Which will make it easier if it's annual, so we can send that letter annually without whatever.
Exactly, and that would allow for the annual review, because the other thing too is, since none of us have that crystal ball that we would desperately like to have, we'll need to revisit each year as to whether this is the correct vehicle for this funding, and if there is adequate funding coming through that makes a difference, because if we set that this year, I think your recommendation was $300,000, so it'd be the amount that exceeds $300,000, would allocate 5% of that towards this. What if it doesn't exceed $300,000? And you have to kind of reconsider what the allocation's gonna be.
Yeah.
I think
So
that's
just
gonna
a
be my
letter
recommendation.
of promise.
Well, it's an allocation, so
An allocation.
for this year, because my understanding is it would be for this year. So you would make an allocation, but it wouldn't be payable until the end of the year, because you won't know until the end of the year
That's right.
what the revenues are gonna be. And to the extent they exceed that $300,000, that's when that 5%, in the way it's written, 5% of the total revenues.
So basically, the whole point is if we make under $350,000, we'll give 5% of our actualized revenue.
under 350, cause I have, so it's, okay.
Yeah.
Starting, so the way it reads right now, just so everybody literally gets on the same page of what we're talking about, starting calendar year 2025, if the tourism panel's total revenue for the calendar year meets or exceeds $300,000, the tourism panel shall allocate 5% of its total revenue to the ECE fund by no later than January 31st of the following, which would be 2026.
Yep.
If and when the panel's total revenue for calendar year meets or exceeds $350,000, the panel shall allocate 10% of its total annual revenue to the ECE fund by January 31st of the following year.
Correct. Yeah, and as an example, this year, we did not even meet that $300,000 threshold.
Am I missing why there's a $50,000 gap in the threshold?
Just because we were just
The
talking about,
percentages.
we were just talking about the percentage, so if we make that $300,000, we would basically give 30 grand, let's just put it that way, right? Or sorry, we'd give 15 grand, because we would be giving 5%. But once we get above $350,000, we'd give 10%, which would be,
Oh, both are overs, not under
Yes,
300 and
If
over
it's-
350, alright, sorry,
That was gonna be one of the points that, so
Alright.
the
Pac-Man
one
was
issue
wrong.
is, if it doesn't meet the $300,000 threshold,
Yeah, what
then there
happens?
is no
yeah.
contribution.
Well, and that, I know that there was conversation in the tourism panel where the tourism panel was of the mind where it's like, even if we only make $280,000, we should still allocate 5%. That was
So
the,
is there a lower threshold than that 300,000 that would trigger the 5%? That's something y'all
We could
can
just say under 350,000, we
Right.
donate 5%.
Right.
Over,
and to be honest, I think, Chris, what's getting confusing is that we had multiple versions of the MOU that were presented to you. And I think that it's a little bit of what Melissa got from Melissa's desk to your desk is what's happening
It's
right now.
confusing,
Yeah.
so.
So the point is under $350,000, 5% of our actualized
Okay.
revenue. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
I get that, like, this, writing an MOU would be complicated. This allows it to be kind of mercurial, like just based on how everybody's feeling that year. We can totally change this, and I appreciate the flexibility, but what an MOU does is kind of says like, it's a little more like impactful, even if you are reviewing it every year.
don't we need an
But
actual
who's the-
entity
I
to
was gonna say,
agree?
I hear you,
Party,
I totally understand the logistical aspect.
Unless the Lake County Community Fund is willing to be that entity with it designated as for this fund.
Which, do we have any other MOUs with the Lake County Community Fund? No, nothing,
I know
okay.
off the top of my head, yeah.
Well, do
Because we have
for
funds.
the emergency funds, the
Well, that's a
emergency
fund,
response?
that's an advisory fund too.
Okay.
So, yeah, the disaster or whatever funds.
Yeah.
We have advisory funds with the community fund, but we don't have anything directly with them for this type of an agreement, if you will.
Could it be?
I
like
wish
a-
that John, sorry, hi, is that loud? I wish that
Loud.
John were here to speak on behalf of the community fund. I feel pretty confident that he would be super willing. That's like the whole point of the community foundation, is to support its 501c3 partners that are underneath it. And so obviously it would be something to talk to him about. And I think in the case that for some reason LCCF does not want to be the entity, Build a Generation would step in and be the entity.
Okay, great, because that was one of my questions, but also I know that with the community fund, John will take it to his board and encourage them to do that if that's the route that's taken. But I guess the question is, do we want this formal agreement versus the more informal allocation letter as a way of not teeing up something that might be duplicated by any of these other participating communities y'all were talking about that could end up, if they do the same thing, end up impacting our ability to meet this goal?
And is it between the county or is it the tourism panel that has?
It's the county, so it's the way we draft this with these type of entities is it's the tourism panel buying through the Lake County Board of County Commissioners.
Okay.
Cause y'all are the contracting party.
Yeah, technically speaking, like, it worked at the tourism panel works at the behest or at the.
Yes.
whatever,
County,
yeah,
BOCC.
work for the county,
Yeah.
so.
So that's why, I mean, we can do it if there's an entity, either LC-BAG or the Lake County Community Fund itself is willing to step into, be the entity for this role, happy to revise this MOU to make it work. If not, that's when my suggestion is do the simple route of just the allocation.
Okay.
And there's a time frame on this, is there a time frame where it has to, okay, so, cause I know then if we're going with other entities, such as Carly's
Sorry, I should-
organization or the community fund, we have to work within the time frame of them being able to present it to their boards and get approval for it as well.
From a fund allocation standpoint, I mean, we're talking about January 31st, 2026, so.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Carly or Stacy, but again, I think for us, it's just about wanting to get this in front of the new board and wanting to make sure that this conversation, that we can come to some sort of final agreement.
But also to show that commitment to the community too.
Exactly.
I think that's some goodwill aspect to it.
My preference would be an MOU. I think it's stronger, I think it's more committing. Even if we can, we can look at it every year, but I just think that it's more I think it's more powerful.
Well, and the Lake County Community Fund has been serving as our fiscal agent, and that is how they see themselves. So I agree with Carly that I do believe John would be willing to be the organization on the MOU with stipulations you want.
Yeah, and so, but I will just disclose that back in the day, I was on the original committee that formed the Lake County Community Fund and the board. And I actually drafted those agreements, and I believe that it does not being the fiscal sponsor does not require them to take on any contractual obligation for the operations. And so that's why I think it would have to be taken to the board to say, yes, we're willing to do that, because I think it's out of their normal scope.
Got it. Okay. Who's gonna ask John?
I'm happy to reach out to John.
That'd be
have a
awesome.
relationship with him and say, hey, here's our situation.
Yeah.
And I'm presuming, Carly, your preference would be for it to go through the community fund, not LC-BAG?
I think it just makes sense since the ECE fund is already set up under LCCF.
Yeah, and Stacy or Carly, could one of you please just be involved with those conversations between Chris and John? I think part of what happens in this game of telephone is conversations, the clarity breaks down quickly, so.
I'm happy to be part of those conversations.
Okay, so I guess what I can do, if I don't have y'all's email address, I can send an email to John and copy Stacy and Carly.
Yeah, I'll send you
Adam
those.
and Lauren.
Yeah,
Whoever
copy
else
the
wants to
world.
be on it.
No, don't have me.
Don't copy.
Everybody
Whoever needs to be on, or town or whoever, on that to get the conversation started.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. I'm happy to be part of that as well, and I just put my email in the chat.
Stacy Petty.
And Chris, I just sent you an email with their two
Everybody's
emails.
on it, awesome, thank you. Alright, we'll get there.
I feel like we need to hydrate. I just wanna say,
I forgot my water bottle today, I'm like,
Oh, man.
I am suffering in here.
Anything else for these folks here, or Adam, or your item here?
I have no more questions.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, I think it's I think it is a very, very good, it has felt from the jump, these conversations with Carly specifically around this ECE fund has felt like a breath of fresh air, cause as Carly alluded to, the other conversations I have had with other, again, I feel really bad dogging nonprofits, but people coming at me pretty aggressively with being like, oh, we know about it, so it's like, it's almost become like a swear word, HB 1117 to me, because it's just left such a bad taste in my mouth, but this conversation has only been positive. The tourism panel is like very excited about it and totally on board with it. They are very happy to supplant what we were doing with the community support program to actually making a difference on a critical issue in our community, so it does feel like a win-win-win, but there's the bureaucratic layers of it, so.
I'm very glad to hear you say that, Adam, because that was always the intent. We didn't want it to feel bad in any way, so I'm glad to hear you say that. We want to be good partners. We don't want it to feel bad in any way. We all have the same goal to help children and families and do what's good for Leadville and Lake County.
And then on a personal note, that $5,000 that Carly mentioned will mean that my son will get to go more to Bright Start, so it is a win-win-win all the way around, so.
Okay, so we will.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, I was just saying,
Thank you, Stacy, thank you, Carly.
we'll aim to get this teed up as soon as possible.
Thank you all.
Great.
With the drafts and stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and again, just remove any language that says anything other than 5% of actualized revenue under $350,000.
Okay.
And then,
Cool, alright, well, I guess that's gonna be it for that, it's 4:17 PM, February 25th, we are going to close this afternoon work session in Lake County Board of County Commissioners.
I actually wanna talk